Welcome back to A Clock in the Journal, where timeless stories come alive. Today, we continue with Maurice Leblanc's gripping masterpiece, 813, a tale where Arsène Lupin steps beyond the role of a gentleman thief into a world of intrigue, espionage, and high-stakes mystery. Let's dive in. Chapter 9. Santé Palace. There was one wild burst of laughter over the whole face of the world. True, the capture of Arsène Lupin made a big sensation, and the public did not grudge the police the praise which they deserved for this revenge so long hoped for and now so fully obtained. The great adventurer was caught. That extraordinary, genial, invisible hero was shivering, like any ordinary criminal, between the four walls of a prison cell, crushed in his turn by that formidable power which is called the law, and which, sooner or later, by inevitable necessity, shatters the obstacles opposed to it, and destroys the work of its adversaries. All this was said, printed, repeated, and discussed ad nauseum. The prefect of police was created a commander, Monsieur Weber, an officer of the Legion of Honor. The skill and courage of their humblest coadjutors were extolled to the skies. Cheers were raised, and paeans of victory struck up. Articles were written and speeches made. Very well. But one thing, nevertheless, rose above the wonderful concert of praise, these noisy demonstrations of satisfaction, and that was an immense, spontaneous, inextinguishable, and tumultuous roar of laughter. Arsène Lupin had been chief of the detective service for 4 years. He had been chief detective for 4 years, and really, legally, he was chief detective still, with all the rights which the title confers, enjoying the esteem of his chiefs, the favor of the government, and the admiration of the public. For 4 years, the public peace and the defense of property had been entrusted to Arsène Lupin. He saw that the law was carried out. He protected the innocent and pursued the guilty. And what services he had rendered! Never was order less disturbed, never was crime discovered with greater certainty and rapidity. The reader need but take back his mind to the Denizou case, the robbery at the Crédit Lyonnais, the attack on the Orléans Express, the murder of Baron Dorf, forming a series of unforeseen and overwhelming triumphs, of magnificent feats of prowess fit to compare with the most famous victories of the most renowned detectives. 6. The murder of Baron Dorf, that mysterious and disconcerting affair, will one day be the subject of a story which will give an idea of Arsène Lupin's astonishing qualities as a detective. Not so very long before, in a speech delivered at the time of the fire at the Louvre and the capture of the incendiaries, Valanglais, the Prime Minister, had said, speaking in defense of the somewhat arbitrary manner in which Monsieur Lenormand had acted on that occasion. With his great powers of discernment, his energy, his qualities of decision and execution, his unexpected methods, his inexhaustible resources, Monsieur Lenormand reminds us of the only man who, if he were still alive, could hope to hold his own against him. I mean, Monsieur Lenormand is an Arsène Lupin in the service of society. And lo and behold, Monsieur Lenormand was none other than Arsène Lupin. That he was a Russian prince who cared. Lupin was an old hand at such changes of personality as that. But chief detective! What a delicious irony! What a whimsical humor in the conduct of that extraordinary life! Monsieur Lenormand, Arsène Lupin. People were now able to explain to themselves the apparently miraculous feats of intelligence, which had quite recently bewildered the crowd and baffled the police. They understood how his accomplice had been juggled away in the middle of the Palais de Justice itself, in broad daylight and on the appointed day. Had he himself not said, "My process is so ingenious and so simple, how surprised people will be on the day when I am free to speak." Is that all? I shall be asked. That is all, but it had to be thought of. It was indeed childishly simple. All you had to do was to be chief of the detective service. Well, Lupin was chief of the detective service, and every police officer obeying his orders had made himself the involuntary and unconscious accomplice of Arsène Lupin. What a comedy! What admirable bluff! It was the monumental and consoling farce of these drab times of ours. Lupin in prison. Lupin, irretrievably conquered, was, in spite of himself, the great conqueror. From his cell he shone over Paris. He was more than ever the idol, more than ever the master. When Arsène Lupin awoke next morning in his room at the Santé Palace, as he at once nicknamed it, he had a very clear vision of the enormous sensation which would be produced by his arrest, under the double name of Cernine and Lenormand, and the double title of Prince-in-Chief of the Detective Service. He rubbed his hands and gave vent to his thoughts. A man can have no better companion in his loneliness than the approval of his contemporaries. O fame, the son of all living men. ... Quote. Seen by daylight, his cell pleased him even better than at night. The window, placed high up in the wall, afforded a glimpse of the branches of a tree, through which peeped the blue of the sky above. The walls were white. There was only one table and one chair, both fastened to the floor. But everything was quite nice and clean. Come, he said, a little rest cure here will be rather charming. But let us see to our toilet. Have I all I want? No. In that case, ring twice for the chambermaid. He pressed the button of an apparatus beside the door, which released a signaling disc in the corridor. After a moment, bolts and bars were drawn outside, a key turned in the lock, and a warder appeared. "Hot water, please," said Lupin. The other looked at him with an air of mingled amazement and rage. "Oh," said Lupin, "and a bath towel! By Jove, there's no bath towel!" The man growled. "You're getting at me, aren't you? You'd better be careful." He was going away when Lupin caught him roughly by the arm. "Here! 100 francs if you'll post a letter for me." He took out a 100-franc note, which he had concealed during the search, and offered it to him. "Where's the letter?" said the warder, taking the money. "Just give me a moment to write it." He sat down at the table, scribbled a few words in pencil on a sheet of paper, put it in an envelope, and addressed the letter. "To Monsieur S.B. 42, Poste Restante, Paris." The warder took the letter and walked away. "That letter," said Lupin to himself, "will reach destination as safely as if I delivered it myself. I shall have the reply in an hour at latest, just the time I want to take a good look into my position." He sat down on his chair and, in an undertone, summed up the situation as follows. "When all is said and done, I have two adversaries to fight at the present moment. There is, first, society, which holds me, and which I can afford to laugh at. Secondly, there is a person, unknown, who does not hold me, but whom I am not inclined to laugh at in the very least. It is he who told the police that I was Cernine. It was he who guessed that I was Monsieur Lenormand. It was he who locked the door of the underground passage, and it was he who had me clapped into prison." Arsène Lupin reflected for a second and then continued. "So, at long last, the struggle lies between him and me, and to keep up that struggle, that is to say, to discover and get to the bottom of the Kesselbach case, here am I, a prisoner, while he is free, unknown, and inaccessible, and holds the two trump cards which I considered mine, Pierre Leduc and old Steinweg. In short, he is near the goal, after finally pushing me back." A fresh contemplative pause, followed by a fresh soliloquy. "The position is far from brilliant. On the one side, everything. On the other, nothing. Opposite me, a man of my own strength, or stronger, because he has not the same scruples that hamper me. And I am without weapons to attack him with." He repeated the last sentence several times, in a mechanical voice, and then stopped and, taking his forehead between his hands, sat for a long time wrapped in thought. "Come in, Mr. Governor," he said, seeing the door open. "Were you expecting me?" "Why, I wrote to you, Mr. Governor, asking you to come. I felt certain that the warder would give you my letter. I was so certain of it that I put your initials S.B. and your age 42 on the envelope." The governor's name, in point of fact, was Stanislas Borelli, and he was 42 years of age. He was a pleasant-looking man, with a very gentle character, who treated the prisoners with all the indulgence possible. He said to Lupin, Your opinion of my subordinate's integrity was quite correct. Here is your money. It shall be handed to you at your release. You will now go through the searching room again." Lupin went with Monsieur Borelli to the little room reserved for this purpose, undressed, and, while his clothes were inspected with justifiable suspicion, himself underwent a most fastidious examination. He was then taken back to his cell, and Monsieur Borelli said, "I feel easier. That's done." "And very well done, Mr. Governor. Your men perform this sort of duty with a delicacy for which I should like to thank them by giving them a small token of my satisfaction." He handed a 100-franc note to Monsieur Borelli, who jumped as though he had been shot. "Oh, but where does that come from?" "No need to rack your brains, Mr. Governor. A man like myself, leading the life that I do, is always prepared for any eventuality, and no mishap, however painful, not even imprisonment, can take him unawares." Seizing the middle finger of his left hand between the thumb and forefinger of the right, he pulled it off smartly and presented it calmly to Monsieur Borelli. "Don't start like that, Mr. Governor. This is not my finger, but just a tube, made of gold-beater's skin and cleverly colored, which fits exactly over my middle finger and gives the illusion of a real finger." And he added, with a laugh, "In such a way, of course, as to conceal a third 100-franc note. What is a poor man to do? He must carry the best purse he can, and must needs make use of it on occasions." He stopped at the sight of Monsieur Borelli's startled face. "Please don't think, Mr. Governor, that I wish to dazzle you with my little parlor tricks. I only wanted to show you that you have to do with a client of a rather special nature, and to tell you that you must not be surprised if I venture, now and again, to break the ordinary rules and regulations of your establishment." The governor had recovered himself. He said plainly, "I prefer to think that you will conform to the rules and not compel me to resort to harsh measures, which you would regret to have to enforce. Isn't that it, Mr. Governor? That's just what I should like to spare you, by proving to you in advance that they would not prevent me from doing as I please, from corresponding with my friends, from defending the grave interests confided to me outside these walls, from writing to the newspapers that accept my inspiration, from pursuing the fulfillment of my plans, and, lastly, from preparing my escape." "Your escape!" Lupin began to laugh heartily. "But think, Mr. Governor, my only excuse for being in prison is to leave it." The argument did not appear to satisfy Monsieur Borelli. He made an effort to laugh in his turn. "Forewarned is forearmed," he said. "That's what I wanted," Lupin replied. "Take all your precautions, Mr. Governor, neglect nothing, so that later they may have nothing to reproach you with. On the other hand, I shall arrange things in such a way that, whatever annoyance you may have to bear in consequence of my escape, your career, at least, shall not suffer. That is all I had to say to you, Mr. Governor. You can go." And while Monsieur Borelli walked away, greatly perturbed by his singular charge and very anxious about the events in preparation, the prisoner threw himself on his bed, muttering, "What cheek, Lupin, old fellow, what cheek! Really, anyone would think that you had some idea as to how you were going to get out of this. The Santé prison is built on the star plan. In the center of the main portion is a round hall, upon which all the corridors converge, so that no prisoner is able to leave his cell without being at once perceived by the overseers posted in the glass box which occupies the middle of that central hall. The thing that most surprises the visitor who goes over the prison is that, at every moment, he will meet prisoners without a guard of any kind, who seem to move about as though they were absolutely free. In reality, in order to go from one point to another, for instance, from their cell to the van waiting in the yard to take them to the Palais de Justice for the magistrate's examination, they pass along straight lines, each of which ends in a door that is opened to them by a warder. The sole duty of the warder is to open and shut this door and to watch the 2 straight lines which it commands. And thus the prisoners, while apparently at liberty to come and go as they please, are sent from door to door, from eye to eye, like so many parcels passed from hand to hand. Outside, municipal guards receive the object and pack it into one of the compartments of the salad basket. 7-7, the French slang expression for its prison van, or Black Maria. Translator's note. This is the ordinary routine. In Lupin's case, it was disregarded entirely. The police were afraid of that walk along the corridors. They were afraid of the prison van. They were afraid of everything. M. Weber came in person, accompanied by 12 constables. The best he had, picked men, armed to the teeth, fetched the formidable prisoner at the door of his cell, and took him in a cab, the driver of which was one of his own men, with mounted municipal guards trotting on each side, in front and behind. "Bravo!" cried Lupin. "I am quite touched by the compliment paid me. A guard of honor. By Jove, Weber, you have the proper hierarchical instinct. You don't forget what is due to your immediate chief." And, tapping him on the shoulder, "Weber, I intend to send in my resignation. I shall name you as my successor." "It's almost done," said Weber. "That's good news. I was a little anxious about my escape. Now I am easy in my mind." From the moment when Weber is chief of the detective service, Monsieur Weber did not reply to the jibe. At heart he had a queer, complex feeling in the presence of his adversary. A feeling made up of the fear with which Lupin inspired him, the deference which he entertained for Prince Sernine, and the respectful admiration which he had always shown to Monsieur Lenormand. All this was mingled with spite, envy, and satisfied hatred. They arrived at the Palais de Justice. At the foot of the mousetrap, a number of detectives were waiting, among whom Monsieur Weber rejoiced to see his best 2 lieutenants, the brothers Dudeville. "Has Marie come?" he asked. "Yes, Chief. Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction is in his room." M. Weber went up the stairs, followed by Lupin, who had the Dudevilles on either side of him. "Geneviève?" whispered the prisoner. "Saved. Where is she?" "With her grandmother." "Mrs. Kesselbach?" "In Paris, at the Bristol." "Suzanne?" "Disappeared." "Steinweg?" "Released." "What has he told you?" "Nothing. Won't make any revelations except to you." "Why?" "We told him he owed his release to you." "Newspapers good this morning?" "Excellent." "Good. If you want to write to me, here are my instructions." They had reached the inner corridor on the first floor, and Lupin slipped a pellet of paper into the hand of one of the brothers, and Monsieur Formerie uttered a delicious phrase when Lupin entered his room accompanied by the deputy chief. "Ah, there you are. I knew we should lay hands on you some day or other." "So did I, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction," said Lupin, "and I am glad that you have been marked out by fate to do justice to the honest man that I am." "He's getting at me," thought M. Formerie. And, in the same ironical and serious tone as Lupin, he retorted, "The honest man that you are, sir, will be asked what he has to say about 344 separate cases of larceny, burglary, swindling and forgery, blackmail, receiving, and so on." 344! "What? Is that all?" cried Lupin. "I really feel quite ashamed." "Don't distress yourself. I shall discover more. But let us proceed in order. Arsène Lupin, in spite of all our inquiries, we have no definite information as to your real name." "How odd! No more have I. We are not even in a position to declare that you are the same Arsène Lupin who was confined in the Santé a few years back, and from there made his first escape. His first escape is good and does you credit. It so happens, in fact," continued Monsieur Formerie, "that the Arsène Lupin card in the measuring department gives a description of Arsène Lupin which differs at all points from your real description. How more and more odd! Different marks, different measurements, different fingerprints. The 2 photographs even are quite unlike. I will therefore ask you to satisfy us as to your exact identity." "That's just what I was going to ask you. I have lived under so many distinct names that I have ended by forgetting my own. I don't know where I am." "So I must enter a refusal to answer?" "An inability. Is this a thought-out plan? Am I to expect the same silence in reply to all my questions?" "Very nearly." "And why?" Lupin struck a solemn attitude and said, "Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction, my life belongs to history. You have only to turn over the annals of the past 15 years and your curiosity will be satisfied. So much for my part. As to the rest, it does not concern me. It is an affair between you and the murderers at the Palace Hotel. Arsène Lupin, the honest man that you are, will have today to explain the murder of Master Altenheim.
Hello, this is new. Is the idea yours, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction?
Exactly.
Very clever. Upon my word, Monsieur Formery, you're getting on.
The position in which you were captured leaves no doubt. None at all. Only I will venture to ask you this. What sort of wound did Altenheim die of? Of a wound in the throat caused by a knife. And where is the knife? It has not been found. How could it not have been found? If I had been the assassin, considering that I was captured beside the very man whom I am supposed to have killed. Who killed him, according to you? The same man that killed Mr. Kesselbach, Chapman, and Boudreau. The nature of the wound is a sufficient proof. How did he get away? Through a trapdoor which you will discover in the room where the tragedy took place. M. Formery assumed an air of slyness. And how was it that you did not follow that useful example? I tried to follow it. But the outlet was blocked by a door which I could not open. It was during this attempt that the other one came back to the room and killed his accomplice for fear of the revelations which he would have been sure to make. At the same time, he hid in a cupboard, where it was subsequently found, the parcel of clothes which I had prepared. What were those clothes for? To disguise myself. When I went to the Glycines, my plan was this: to hand Altenheim over to the police, to suppress my own identity as Prince Sernine, and to reappear under the features.
Of Monsieur Lenormand, I suppose?
Exactly. No.
What?
Monsieur Formery gave a knowing smile and wagged his forefinger from left to right and right to left. No, he repeated. What do you mean by no? That story about Monsieur Lenormand? Well, will do for the public, my friend. But you won't make Monsieur Formery swallow that Lupin and Lenormand were one and the same man. He burst out laughing. Lupin, chief of the detective service? No, anything you like. But not that. There are limits. I am an easy-going fellow. I'll believe anything. But still, come, between ourselves, what was the reason of this fresh hoax? I confess I can't see. Lupin looked at him in astonishment. In spite of all that he knew of M. Formery, he could not conceive such a degree of infatuation and blindness. There was, at that moment, only one person in the world who refused to believe in Prince Sernine's double personality, and that was Monsieur Formery. Lupin turned to the deputy chief, who stood listening open-mouthed. My dear Weber, I fear your promotion is not so certain as I thought, for, you see, if Monsieur Lenormand is not myself, then he exists. And if he exists, I have no doubt that Monsieur Formery, with all his acumen, will end by discovering him, in which case— We shall discover him all right, Monsieur Lupin, cried the examining magistrate. I'll undertake that, and I tell you that, when you and he are confronted, we shall see some fun. He chuckled and drummed with his fingers on the table. How amusing. Oh, one's never bored when you're there, that I'll say for you. So you're Monsieur Lenormand, and it's you who arrested your accomplice Marco. Just so. Wasn't it my duty to please the Prime Minister and save the Cabinet? The fact is historical. Monsieur Formery held his sides. Oh, I shall die of laughing, I know I shall. Lord, what a joke. That answer will travel round the world. So, according to your theory, it was with you that I made the first inquiries at the Palace Hotel after the murder of Mr. Kesselbach? ... Surely it was with me that you investigated the case of the stolen coronet when I was Duc de Chamarace. 8, retorted Lupin, in a sarcastic voice. 8. See Arsène Lupin by Edgar Jepson and Maurice Leblanc. M. Formery gave a start. All his merriment was dispelled by that odious recollection. Turning suddenly grave, he asked, "So you persist in that absurd theory?" "I must, because it is the truth. It would be easy for you to take a steamer to Cochin China, and to find at Saigon the proofs of the death of the real Monsieur Lenormand, the worthy man whom I replaced, and whose death certificate I can show you." "Humbug." "Upon my word, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction, I don't care one way or the other. If it annoys you that I should be Monsieur Lenormand, don't let's talk about it. We won't talk about myself. We won't talk about anything at all, if you prefer. Besides, of what use can it be to you? The Kesselbach case is such a tangled affair that I myself don't know where I stand. There's only one man who might help you. I have not succeeded in discovering him. And I don't think that you—" "What's the man's name?" "He's an old man, a German called Steinweg. But of course you've heard about him, Weber, and the way in which he was carried off in the middle of the Palais de Justice?" Monsieur Formerie threw an inquiring glance at the deputy chief. And Monsieur Weber said, "I undertake to bring that person to you, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction." "So that's done," said Monsieur Formerie, rising from his chair. "As you see, Lupin, this was merely a formal examination to bring the two duelists together. Now that we have crossed swords, all that we need is the necessary witness of our fencing match, your counsel." "Tut! Is it indispensable?" "Indispensable. Employ counsel in view of such an unlikely trial." "You must." "In that case, I'll choose Maître Quambal, the president of the Corporation of the Bar. You are wise. You will be well defended." The first sitting was over. Monsieur Weber led the prisoner away. As he went down the stairs of the mousetrap between the two Dudevilles, Lupin said, in short, imperative sentences, "Watch Steinweg. Don't let him speak to anybody. Be there tomorrow. I'll give you some letters. One for you. Important." Downstairs, he walked up to the municipal guards surrounding the taxicab. "Home, boys," he exclaimed. "And quick about it. I have an appointment with myself for 2 o'clock precisely." There were no incidents during the drive. On returning to his cell, Lupin wrote a long letter, full of detailed instructions, to the brothers Dudeville, and 2 other letters. One was for Geneviève. "Geneviève, you now know who I am, and you will understand why I concealed from you the name of him who twice carried you away in his arms when you were a little girl. Geneviève, I was your mother's friend, a distant friend, of whose double life she knew nothing, but upon whom she thought that she could rely. And that is why, before dying, she wrote me a few lines asking me to watch over you. Unworthy as I am of your esteem, Geneviève, I shall continue faithful to that trust. Do not drive me from your heart entirely. Arsène Lupin." The other letter was addressed to Dolores Kesselbach. Prince Sernine was led to seek Mrs. Kesselbach's acquaintance by motives of self-interest alone. But a great longing to devote himself to her was the cause of his continuing it. Now that Prince Sernine has become merely Arsène Lupin, he begs Mrs. Kesselbach not to deprive him of the right of protecting her, at a distance, and as a man protects one whom he will never see again. There were some envelopes on the table. He took up one and took up a second. Then, when he took up the third, he noticed a sheet of white paper, the presence of which surprised him, and which had words stuck upon it, evidently cut out of a newspaper. He read, "You have failed in your fight with the Baron. Give up interesting yourself in the case, and I will not oppose your escape. L.M." Once more Lupin had that sense of repulsion and terror with which this nameless and fabulous being always inspired him, a sense of disgust which one feels at touching a venomous animal, a reptile. "He again," he said. "Even here." That also scared him, the sudden vision which he at times received of this hostile power, a power as great as his own and disposing of formidable means, the extent of which he himself was unable to realize. He at once suspected his warder. But how had it been possible to corrupt that hard-featured, stern-eyed man? "Well, so much the better, after all," he cried. "I have never had to do except with dullards. In order to fight myself, I had to chuck myself into the command of the detective service. This time, I have someone to deal with. Here's a man who puts me in his pocket. By sleight of hand, one might say. If I succeed from my prison cell in avoiding his blows and smashing him, in seeing old Steinweg and dragging his confession from him, in setting the Kesselbach case on its legs and turning the whole of it into cash, in defending Mrs. Kesselbach and winning fortune and happiness for Geneviève, well, then Lupin will be Lupin still. ... Quote, 11 days passed. On the 12th day, Lupin woke very early and exclaimed, "Let me see. If my calculations are correct, and if the gods are on my side, there will be some news today. I have had 4 interviews with Formerie. The fellow must be worked up to the right point now, and the Dudevilles, on their side, must have been busy. We shall have some fun." He flung out his fists to right and left, brought them back to his chest, then flung them out again, and brought them back again. This movement, which executed 30 times in succession, was followed by a bending of his body backwards and forwards. Next came an alternate lifting of the legs, and then an alternate swinging of the arms. The whole performance occupied a quarter of an hour, the quarter of an hour which he devoted every morning to Swedish exercises to keep his muscles in condition. Then he sat down to his table, took up some sheets of white paper, which were arranged in numbered packets, and, folding one of them, made it into an envelope, a work which he continued to do with a series of successive sheets. It was the task which he had accepted and which he forced himself to do daily, the prisoners having the right to choose the labor which they preferred, sticking envelopes, making paper fans, metal purses, and so on. And in this way, while occupying his hands with an automatic exercise and keeping his muscles supple with mechanical bendings, Lupin was able to have his thoughts constantly fixed on his affairs. And his affairs were complicated enough in all conscience. There was one, for instance, which surpassed all the others in importance, and for which he had to employ all the resources of his genius. How was he to have a long, quiet conversation with old Steinweg? The necessity was immediate. In a few days, Steinweg would have recovered from his imprisonment, would receive interviews, might blab, to say nothing of the inevitable interference of the enemy. Quote, the other one. Single quote. It was essential that Steinweg's secret, Pierre Leduc's secret, should be revealed to no one but Lupin. Once published, the secret lost all its value. The bolts grated. The key turned noisily in the lock. "Ah, it's you, most excellent of jailers. Has the moment come for the last toilet? The haircut that precedes the great final cut of all?" "Magistrate's examination," said the man, laconically. Lupin walked through the corridors of the prison and was received by the municipal guards, who locked him into the prison van. He reached the Palais de Justice 20 minutes later. One of the Dudevilles was waiting near the stairs. As they went up, he said to Lupin, "You'll be confronted today. Everything settled?" "Yes." "Weber?" "Busy elsewhere." Lupin walked into Monsieur Formerie's room, and at once recognized old Steinweg, sitting on a chair, looking ill and wretched. A municipal guard was standing behind him. M. Formerie scrutinized the prisoner attentively, as though he hoped to draw important conclusions from his contemplation of him, and said, "You know who this gentleman is?" "Why, Steinweg, of course. ... Quote. Yes, thanks to the active inquiries of M. Monsieur Weber and of his 2 officers, the brothers Dudeville, we have found Mr. Steinweg, who, according to you, knows the ins and outs of the Kesselbach case, the name of the murderer, and all the rest of it. I congratulate you, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction. Your examination will go swimmingly." "I think so. There is only one but. Mr. Steinweg refuses to reveal anything, except in your presence." "Well, I never. How odd of him! Does Arsène Lupin inspire him with so much affection and esteem? Not Arsène Lupin, but Prince Sernine, who, he says, saved his life, and Monsieur Lenormand, with whom, he says, he began a conversation. ... Quote. At the time when I was chief of the detective service," Lupin broke in, "so you consent to admit." "Mr. Steinweg," said the magistrate, Do you recognize Monsieur Lenormand? No, but I know that Arsène Lupin and he are one. So you consent to speak? Yes, but we are not alone. How do you mean? There is only my clerk here, and the guard. Monsieur le juge d'instruction, the secret which I am about to reveal is so important that you yourself would be sorry. Guard, go outside, please, said Monsieur Formerie. Come back at once if I call. Do you object to my clerk, Steinweg? No. It might be better, but, however, then speak. For that matter, nothing that you reveal will be put down in black on white. One word more, though. I ask you for the last time. Is it indispensable that the prisoner should be present at this interview? Quite indispensable. You will see the reason for yourself. He drew the chair up to the magistrate's desk. Lupin remained standing, near the clerk, and the old man, speaking in a loud voice, said, It is now 10 years since a series of circumstances, which I need not enter into, made me acquainted with an extraordinary story in which 2 persons are concerned. Their names, please. I will give the names presently. For the moment, let me say that one of these persons occupies an exceptional position in France, and that the other an Italian, or rather a Spaniard. Yes, a Spaniard. A bound across the room, followed by 2 formidable blows of the fist. Lupin's 2 arms had darted out to right and left, as though impelled by springs, and his 2 fists, hard as cannonballs, caught the magistrate and his clerk on the jaw, just below the ear. The magistrate and the clerk collapsed over their tables, in 2 lumps, without a moan. Well hit, said Lupin. That was a neat bit of work. He went to the door and locked it softly. Then returning, Steinweg, have you the chloroform? Are you quite sure that they have fainted? Asks the old man, trembling with fear. What do you think? But it will only last for 3 or 4 minutes, and that is not long enough. The German produced from his pocket a bottle and 2 pads of cotton wool, ready prepared. Lupin uncorked the bottle, poured a few drops of the chloroform on the 2 pads, and held them to the noses of the magistrate and his clerk. Capital! We have 10 minutes of peace and quiet before us. That will do, but let's make haste all the same. And not a word too much, old man, do you hear? He took him by the arm. You see what I am able to do. Here we are, alone in the very heart of the Palais de Justice, because I wished it. Yes, said the old man. So you are going to tell me your secret? Yes, I told it to Kesselbach, because he was rich and could turn it to better account than anybody I knew. But prisoner, and absolutely powerless though you are, I consider you 100 times as strong as Kesselbach, with his 100 millions. In that case, speak, and let us take things in their proper order. The name of the murderer? That's impossible. How do you mean, impossible? I thought you knew it and were going to tell me everything. Everything. But not that. But later on. You're mad. Why? I have no proofs. Later, when you are free, we will hunt together. Besides, what's the good? And then, really, I can't tell you. You're afraid of him? Yes. Very well, said Lupin. After all, that's not the most urgent matter. As to the rest, you've made up your mind to speak? Without reserve. Well then, answer. Who is Pierre le Duc? Herman I V. Grand Duke of Zweibrücken-Veldenz, Prince of Bern-Castell, Count of Fistingen, Lord of Wiesbaden and other places. Lupin felt a thrill of joy at learning that his protégé was definitely not the son of a pork butcher. The devil, he muttered. So we have a handle to our name. As far as I remember, the Grand Duchy of Zweibrücken-Veldenz is in Prussia. Yes, on the Moselle. The House of Veldenz is a branch of the Palatine House of Zweibrücken. The Grand Duchy was occupied by the French after the Peace of Luneville and formed part of the department of Montonnerre. In 1814, it was restored in favor of Herman I, the great-grandfather of Pierre le Duc, his son, Herman II. spent a riotous youth, ruined himself, squandered the finances of his country, and made himself impossible to his subjects, who ended by partly burning the old castle at Veldenz and driving their sovereign out of his dominions. The Grand Duchy was then administered and governed by 3 regents, in the name of Hermann II, who, by a curious anomaly, did not abdicate, but retained his title as reigning Grand Duke. He lived, rather short of cash, in Berlin. Later he fought in the French War, by the side of Bismarck, of whom he was a friend. He was killed by a shell at the siege of Paris, and, in dying, entrusted Bismarck with the charge of his son Hermann, that is, Hermann III. "The father, therefore, of our Le Duc," said Lupin. "Yes, the Chancellor took a liking to Hermann III, and used often to employ him as a secret envoy to persons of distinction abroad. At the fall of his patron Hermann III, left Berlin, traveled about and returned, and settled in Dresden. When Bismarck died, Hermann III, was there. He himself died 2 years later. These are public facts, known to everybody in Germany, and that is the story of the 3 Hermanns, Grand Dukes of Zweibrücken-Veldenz, in the 19th century. But the 4th, Hermann I V, the one in whom we are interested? We will speak of him presently. Let us now pass on to unknown facts. "Facts known to you alone," said Lupin. "To me alone, and to a few others." "How do you mean, a few others? Hasn't the secret been kept?" Yes, the secret has been well kept by all who know it." "Have no fear, it is very much to their interest, I assure you, not to divulge it." "Then how do you know it?" "Through an old servant and private secretary of the Grand Duke Hermann, the last of the name. This servant, who died in my arms in South Africa, began by confiding to me that his master was secretly married and had left a son behind him. Then he told me the great secret. The one which you afterwards revealed to Kesselbach." "Yes." "1 second. Will you excuse me?" Lupin bent over Monsieur Formerie, satisfied himself that all was well and the heart beating normally, and said, "Go on." Steinweg resumed. "On the evening of the day on which Bismarck died, the Grand Duke Hermann III and his faithful manservant, my South African friend, took a train which brought them to Munich in time to catch the express for Vienna. From Vienna, they went to Constantinople, then to Cairo, then to Naples, then to Tunis, then to Spain, then to Paris, then to London, to St. Petersburg, to Warsaw. And in none of these towns did they stop. They took a cab, had their 2 bags put on the top, rushed through the streets, hurried to another station or to the landing stage, and once more took the train or the steamer. In short, they were being followed and were trying to put their pursuers off the scent," Arsène Lupin concluded. "One evening they left the city of Treves, dressed in workmen's caps and linen jackets, each with a bundle slung over his shoulder at the end of a stick. They covered on foot the 22 miles to Veldenz, where the old castle of Zweibrücken stands, or rather the ruins of the old castle. No descriptions, please. All day long they remained hidden in a neighboring forest. At night they went up to the old walls. Hermann ordered his servant to wait for him, and himself scaled the wall at a breach known as the Wolf's Gap. He returned in an hour's time, and the following week, after more peregrinations, he went back home to Dresden. The expedition was over. And what was the object of the expedition? The Grand Duke never breathed a word about it to his servant, but certain particulars and the coincidence of facts that ensued enabled the man to build up the truth, at least in part. Quick, Steinweg. Time is running short now, and I am eager to know. A fortnight after the expedition, Count von Waldemar, an officer in the Emperor's bodyguard and one of his personal friends, called on the Grand Duke, accompanied by 6 men. He was there all day, locked up with the Grand Duke in his study. There were repeated sounds of altercations, of violent disputes. One phrase even was overheard by the servant, who was passing through the garden under the windows. "Those papers were handed to you. His Imperial Majesty is sure of it. If you refuse to give them to me of your own free will, the rest of the sentence, the meaning of the threat, and for that matter the whole scene can be easily guessed by what followed. Hermann's house was ransacked from top to bottom, but that is against the law. It would have been against the law if the Grand Duke had objected, but he himself accompanied the Count in his search. And what were they looking for? The Chancellor's memoirs? Something better than that. They were looking for a parcel of secret documents which were known to exist, owing to indiscretions that had been committed, and which were known for certain to have been entrusted to the Grand Duke Hermann's keeping. Lupin muttered excitedly. Secret documents, and very important ones, no doubt. Of the highest importance. The publication of those papers would lead to results which it would be impossible to foresee, not only from the point of view of home politics, but also from that of Germany's relations with the foreign powers. "Oh," said Lupin, throbbing with emotion. "Oh, can it be possible? What proof have you?" "What proof?" "The evidence of the Grand Duke's wife, the confidences which she made to the servant after her husband's death." "Yes, yes," stammered Lupin. "We have the evidence of the Grand Duke himself." "Better still," said Steinweg. "What?" A document written in his own hand, signed by him and containing what?" "A list of the secret papers confided to his charge." "Tell me, in 2 words." "In 2 words? That can't be done. The document is a very long one, scattered all over with annotations and remarks which are sometimes impossible to understand. Let me mention just 2 titles, which obviously refer to 2 bundles of secret papers. Original letters of the Crown Prince to Bismarck is one. The dates show that these letters were written during the 3 months of the reign of Frederick III. To picture what the letters may contain, you have only to think of the Emperor Frederick's illness, his quarrels with his son. Yes, I know. And the other title? Photographs of the letters of Frederick III. And the Empress Victoria to the Queen of England. "Do you mean to say that that's there?" asked Lupin in a choking voice. "Listen to the Grand Duke's notes. Text of the treaty with Great Britain and France. And these rather obscure words: Alsace-Lorraine, colonies. Limitation of naval armaments. ... "It says that?" blurted Lupin. "And you call that obscure?" "Why, the words are dazzling with light." "Oh, can it be possible? And what next? What next?" As he spoke, there was a noise at the door. Someone was knocking. "You can't come in," said Lupin. "I am busy. Go on, Steinweg." "But," said the old man in a great state of alarm. The door was shaken violently, and Lupin recognized Weber's voice. He shouted, "A little patience, Weber. I shall have done in 5 minutes." He gripped the old man's arm and, in a tone of command, "Be easy and go on with your story. So according to you, the expedition of the Grand Duke and his servant to Velden's castle had no other object than to hide those papers? There can be no question about that. Very well. But the Grand Duke may have taken them away since." "No, he did not leave Dresden until his death. But the Grand Duke's enemies, the men who had everything to gain by recovering them and destroying them, can't they have tried to find out where the papers were?" "They have tried." "How do you know?" "You can understand that I did not remain inactive, and that my first care, after receiving those revelations, was to go to Velden's and make inquiries for myself in the neighboring villages. Well, I learnt that on 2 separate occasions the castle was invaded by a dozen men, who came from Berlin furnished with credentials to the regions." "Well?" "Well, they found nothing, for since that time the castle has been found closed to the public." "But what prevents anybody from getting in?" "A garrison of 50 soldiers, who keep watch day and night." "Soldiers of the Grand Duchy?" "No, soldiers drafted from the Emperor's own bodyguard." The din in the passage increased. "Open the door!" a voice cried. "I order you to open the door!" "I can't." Weber, old chap, the lock is stuck. If you take my advice, you had better cut the door all round the lock.
Open the door!
And what about the fate of Europe, which we are discussing? He turned to the old man.
So you were not able to enter the castle?
No, but you are persuaded that the papers in question are hidden there? Look here, haven't I given you proofs enough? Aren't you convinced? Yes, muttered Lupin. That's where they are hidden. There's no doubt about it. That's where they are hidden. ... He seemed to see the castle. He seemed to conjure up the mysterious hiding place. And the vision of an inexhaustible treasure, the dream of chests filled with riches and precious stones, could not have excited him more than the idea of those few scraps of paper watched over by the Kaiser's guards. What a wonderful conquest to embark upon, and how worthy of his powers! And what a proof of perspicacity and intuition he had once more given by throwing himself at a venture upon that unknown track. Outside, the men were working at the lock. Lupin asked of old Steinweg, what did the Grand Duke die of? An attack of pleurisy, which carried him off in a few days. He hardly recovered consciousness before the end, and the horrible thing appears to have been that he was seen to make violent efforts between his fits of delirium to collect his thoughts and utter connected words. From time to time he called his wife, looked at her in a desperate way, and vainly moved his lips. In a word, he spoke, said Lupin, cutting him short, for the working at the lock was beginning to make him anxious. No, he did not speak, but, in a comparatively lucid moment, he summoned up the energy to make some marks on a piece of paper which his wife gave him. Well, those marks, ? They were illegible for the most part. For the most part? But the others? Asked Lupin greedily. The others? There were, first, 3 perfectly distinct figures. An 8, a 1, and a 3 inches. Yes, 813, I know. And next? And next, there were some letters, several letters, of which all that can be made out for certain are a group of 3 followed, immediately after, by a group of 2 letters. Apo on, is that it? Oh, so you know. ... The lock was yielding. Almost all the screws had been taken out. Lupin, suddenly alarmed at the thought of being interrupted, asked, so that this incomplete word, apo on, and the number 813 are the formulas which the Grand Duke bequeathed to his wife and son to enable them to find the secret papers? Yes. What became of the Grand Duke's wife? She died soon after her husband, of grief, one might say. And was the child looked after by the family? What family? The Grand Duke had no brothers or sisters. Moreover, he was only morganatically and secretly married. No, the child was taken away by Herman's old manservant, who brought him up under the name of Pierre le Duc. He was a bad type of boy, self-willed, capricious, and troublesome. One day he went off and was never seen again. Did he know the secret of his birth? Yes, and he was shown the sheet of paper on which Herman III had written the letters and figures. And after that, this revelation was made to no one but yourself, that's all. And you confided only in Mr. Kesselbach? Yes, but, out of prudence, while showing him the sheet of letters and figures and the list of which I spoke to you, I kept both those documents in my own possession. Events have proved that I was right. Lupin was now clinging to the door with both hands. Weber, he roared, you're very indiscreet. I shall report you. Steinweg, have you those documents? Yes. Are they in a safe place? Absolutely. In Paris? No. So much the better. Don't forget that your life is in danger and that you have people after you. I know. The least false step and I am done for. Exactly. So take your precautions, throw the enemy off the scent, go and fetch your papers and await my instructions. The thing is cut and dried. In a month, at latest, we will go to Velden's castle together. Suppose I'm in prison. I will take you out. Can you? The very day after I come out myself. No, I'm wrong. The same evening, an hour later. You have the means? Since the last 10 minutes, an infallible means. You have nothing more to say to me? No. Then I'll open the door. He pulled back the door and, bowing to M. Weber, my poor old Weber, I don't know what excuse to make. He did not finish his sentence. The sudden inrush of the deputy chief and 3 policemen left him no time. Monsieur Weber was white with rage and indignation. The sight of the 2 men lying outstretched quite unsettled him. "Dead!" he exclaimed. "Not a bit of it, not a bit of it," chuckled Lupin. "Only asleep. Formerie was tired out, so I allowed him a few moments' rest." "Enough of this humbug," shouted Monsieur Weber, and, turning to the policeman, "Take him back to the Santé, and keep your eyes open, damn it. As for this visitor—" Lupin learnt nothing more as to Weber's intentions with regard to old Steinweg. A crowd of municipal guards and police constables hustled him down to the prison van. On the stairs, Dudeville whispered, "Weber had a line to warn him. It told him to mind the confrontation, and to be on his guard with Steinweg." The note was signed L.M. But Lupin hardly bothered his head about all this. What did he care for the murderer's hatred or old Steinweg's fate? He possessed Rudolf Kesselbach's secret. Chapter 10. Lupin's Great Scheme. Contrary to his expectations, Lupin had no sort of annoyance to undergo in consequence of his assault on Monsieur Formerie. The examining magistrate came to the Santé in person 2 days later, and told him with some embarrassment and with an affectation of kindness that he did not intend to pursue the matter further. "Nor I either," retorted Lupin. "What do you mean?" "Well, I mean that I shall send no communication to the press about this particular matter, nor do anything that might expose you to ridicule, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction. The scandal shall not be made public, I promise. That is what you want, is it not?" M. Formerie blushed and, without replying, continued, "Only, henceforth, your examinations will take place here." "It's quite right that the law should put itself out for Lupin," said that gentleman. The announcement of this decision, which interrupted his almost daily meetings with the Dudevilles, did not disturb Lupin. He had taken his precautions from the first day, by giving the Dudevilles all the necessary instructions, and, now that the preparations were nearly completed, reckoned upon being able to turn old Steinweg's confidences to the best account without delay, and to obtain his liberty by one of the most extraordinary and ingenious schemes that had ever entered his brain. His method of correspondence was a simple one, and he had devised it at once. Every morning he was supplied with sheets of paper in numbered packets. He made these into envelopes, and every evening the envelopes, duly folded and gummed, were fetched away. Now Lupin, noticing that his packet always bore the same number, had drawn the inference that the distribution of the numbered packets was always effected in the same order among the prisoners who had chosen that particular kind of work. Experience showed that he was right. It only remained for the Dudevilles to bribe one of the employees of the private firm entrusted with the supply and dispatch of the envelopes. This was easily done, and thenceforward Lupin, sure of success, had only to wait quietly until the sign agreed upon between him and his friends appeared upon the top sheet of the packet. On the 6th day, he gave an exclamation of delight. "At last," he said. He took a tiny bottle from a hiding-place, uncorked it, moistened the tip of his forefinger with the liquid which it contained, and passed his finger over the 3rd sheet in the packet. In a moment strokes appeared, then letters, then words and sentences. He read, "All well. Steinweg free, hiding in country. Genevieve Ernemont good health. Often goes Hotel Bristol to see Mrs. Kesselbach, who is ill. Meets Pierre Leduc there every time. Answer by same means. No danger." So communications were established with the outside. Once more, Lupin's efforts were crowned with success. All that he had to do now was to execute his plan and lead the press campaign which he had prepared in the peaceful solitude of his prison. 3 days later, these few lines appeared in the Grand Journal. Quite apart from Prince Bismarck's memoirs, which, according to well-informed people, contain merely the official history of the events in which the great chancellor was concerned, there exists a series of confidential letters of no little interest. These letters have been recently discovered. We hear, on good authority, that they will be published almost immediately. My readers will remember the noise which these mysterious sentences made throughout the civilized world, the comments in which people indulged, the suggestions put forward, and, in particular, the controversy that followed in the German press. Who had inspired those lines? What were the letters in question? Who had written them to the Chancellor, or who had received them from him? Was it an act of posthumous revenge, or was it an indiscretion committed by one of Bismarck's correspondents? A second note settled public opinion as to certain points, but, at the same time, worked it up to a strange pitch of excitement. It ran as follows: to the editor of the Grand Journal, Santé Palace, Cell 14, 2nd Division. Sir, you inserted in your issue of Tuesday last a paragraph based upon a few words which I let fall the other evening in the course of a lecture which I was delivering at the Santé on foreign politics. Your correspondent's paragraph, although accurate in all essential particulars, requires a slight correction. The letters exist as stated, and it is impossible to deny their exceptional importance, seeing that, for 10 years, they have been the object of an uninterrupted search on the part of the government interested. But nobody knows where they are hidden, and nobody knows a single word of what they contain. The public, I am convinced, will bear me no ill will if I keep it waiting for some time before satisfying its legitimate curiosity. Apart from the fact that I am not in possession of all the elements necessary for the pursuit of the truth, my present occupation does not allow me to devote so much time as I could wish to this matter. All that I can say for the moment is that the letters were entrusted by the dying statesman to one of his most faithful friends, and that this friend had eventually to suffer the serious consequences of his loyalty. Constant spying, domiciliary visits, nothing was spared him. I have given orders to 2 of the best agents of my secret police to take up this scent from the start, in a position to get to the bottom of this exciting mystery. I have the honor to be, sir, your obedient servant, Arsène Lupin. So it was Arsène Lupin who was conducting the case. It was he who, from his prison cell, was stage managing the comedy, or the tragedy announced in the first note. What luck! Everybody was delighted. With an artist like Lupin, the spectacle could not fail to be both picturesque and startling. 3 days later, the Grand Journal contained the following letter from Arsène Lupin. The name of the devoted friend to whom I referred has been imparted to me. It was the Grand Duke Hermann III, reigning, although dispossessed, sovereign of the Grand Duchy of Zweibrücken-Veldenz, and a confidant of Prince Bismarck, whose entire friendship he enjoyed. A thorough search was made of his house by Count von W., at the head of 12 men. The result of this search was purely negative, but the Grand Duke was nevertheless proved to be in possession of the papers. Where had he hidden them? This was a problem which probably nobody in the world would be able to solve at the present moment. I must ask for 24 hours in which to solve it. Arsène Lupin. And 24 hours later, the promised note appeared. The famous letters are hidden in the feudal castle of Veldenz, the capital of the Grand Duchy of Zweibrücken. The castle was partly destroyed in the course of the 19th century. Where exactly are they hidden, and what are the letters precisely? These are the 2 problems which I am now engaged in unraveling, and I shall publish the solution in 4 days' time. Arsène Lupin. On the day stated, men scrambled to obtain copies of the Grand Journal. To the general disappointment, the promised information was not given. The same silence followed on the next day and the day after. What had happened? It leaked out through an indiscretion at the prefecture of police. The governor of the Santé, it appeared, had been warned that Lupin was communicating with his accomplices by means of the packets of envelopes which he made. Nothing had been discovered, but it was thought best in any case to forbid all work to the insufferable prisoner. To this, the insufferable prisoner replied, "As I have nothing to do now, I may as well attend to my trial. Please let my counsel, Maître Kimbel, know." It was true. Lupin, who, hitherto, had refused to hold any intercourse with Maître Quimbel, now consented to see him and to prepare his defense. On the next day, Maître Quimbel, in cheery tones, asked for Lupin to be brought to the barrister's room. He was an elderly man wearing a pair of very powerful spectacles, which made his eyes seem enormous. He put his hat on the table, spread out his briefcase, and at once began to put a series of questions which he had carefully prepared. Lupin replied with extreme readiness, and even volunteered a host of particulars, which Maître Quimbel took down, as he spoke, on slips pinned one to the other. "And so you say," continued the barrister, with his head over his papers, "that, at that time—" "I say that, at that time," Lupin answered, little by little, with a series of natural and hardly perceptible movements. He leant elbows on the table. He gradually lowered his arms, slipped his hand under Maître Quimbel's hat, put his finger into the leather band, and took out one of those strips of paper, folded lengthwise, which the hatter inserts between the leather and the lining when the hat is a trifle too large. He unfolded the paper. It was a message from Dudeville, written in a cipher agreed upon beforehand. "I am engaged as indoor servant at Maître Quimbel's. You can answer by the same means without fear. It was L.M., the murderer, who gave away the envelope trick. A good thing that you foresaw this move." Hereupon followed a minute report of all the facts and comments caused by Lupin's revelations. Lupin took from his pocket a similar strip of paper containing his instructions, quietly substituted it in the place of the other, and drew his hand back again. The trick was played, and Lupin's correspondence with the Grand Journal was resumed without further delay. I apologize to the public for not keeping my promise. The postal arrangements at the Santé Palace are woefully inadequate. However, we are near the end. I have in hand all the documents that establish the truth upon an indisputable basis. I shall not publish them for the moment. Nevertheless, I will say this. Among the letters are some that were addressed to the Chancellor by one who, at that time, declared himself his disciple and his admirer, and who was destined, several years after, to rid himself of that irksome tutor and to govern alone. I trust that I make myself sufficiently clear, and, on the next day, the letters were written during the late Emperor's illness. I need hardly add more to prove their importance. 4 days of silence, and then this final note, which caused a stir that has not yet been forgotten. My investigation is finished. I now know everything. By dint of reflection, I have guessed the secret of the hiding place. My friends are going to Veldenz, and, in spite of every obstacle, will enter the castle by a way which I am pointing out to them. The newspapers will then publish photographs of the letters, of which I already know the tenor, but I prefer to reproduce the whole text. This certain inevitable publication will take place in a fortnight from today precisely, on the 22nd of August next. Between this and then I will keep silence, and wait. The communications to the Grand Journal did, in fact, stop for a time, but Lupin never ceased corresponding with his friends, via the hat, as they said among themselves. It was so simple. There was no danger. Who could ever suspect that Maître Quimbel's hat served Lupin as a letter-box? Every 2 or 3 mornings, whenever he called, in fact, the celebrated advocate faithfully brought his clients letters. Letters from Paris, letters from the country, letters from Germany, all reduced and condensed by Dudeville into a brief form and cipher language. And, an hour later, Maître Quimbel solemnly walked away, carrying Lupin's orders. Now one day, the governor of the Santé received a telephone message, signed L.M., informing him that Maître Quimbel was, in all probability, serving Lupin as his unwitting postman, and that it would be advisable to keep an eye upon the worthy man's visits. The governor told Maître Quimbel, who thereupon resolved to bring his junior with him. So once again, in spite of all Lupin's efforts, in spite of his fertile powers of invention, in spite of the marvels of ingenuity which he renewed after each defeat, once again Lupin found himself cut off from communication with the outside world by the infernal genius of his formidable adversary. And he found himself thus cut off at the most critical moment, at the solemn minute when, from his cell, he was playing his last trump card against the coalesced forces that were overwhelming him so terribly. On the 13th of August, as he sat facing the two councils, his attention was attracted by a newspaper in which some of Maître Combel's papers were wrapped up. He saw a heading in very large type, 813. The subheadings were, "A fresh murder. The excitement in Germany. Has the secret of the APOON been discovered?" Lupin turned pale with anguish. Below, he read the words, "Two sensational telegrams reach us at the moment of going to press. The body of an old man has been found near Augsburg, with his throat cut with a knife. The police have succeeded in identifying the victim. It is Steinweg, the man mentioned in the Kesselbach case." On the other hand, a correspondent telegraphs that the famous English detective Holmlock Shears has been hurriedly summoned to Cologne. He will there meet the Emperor, and they will both proceed to Veldenz Castle. Holmlock Shears is said to have undertaken to discover the secret of the APOON. If he succeeds, it will mean the pitiful failure of the incomprehensible campaign which Arsène Lupin has been conducting for the past month in so strange a fashion. Perhaps public curiosity was never so much stirred as by the duel announced to take place between Shears and Lupin, an invisible duel in the circumstances, an anonymous duel, one might say, in which everything would happen in the dark, in which people would be able to judge only by the final results, and yet an impressive duel, because of all the scandal that circled around the adventure, and because of the stakes and dispute between the two irreconcilable enemies, now once more opposed to each other. And it was a question not of small private interests, of insignificant burglaries, of trumpery individual passions, but of a matter of really worldwide importance, involving the politics of the three great Western nations and capable of disturbing the peace of the world. People waited anxiously, and no one knew exactly what he was waiting for. For, after all, if the detective came out victorious in the duel, if he found the letters, who would ever know? What proof would anyone have of his triumph? In the main, all hopes were centered on Lupin, on his well-known habit of calling the public to witness his acts. What was he going to do? How could he avert the frightful danger that threatened him? Was he even aware of it? Those were the questions which men asked themselves. Between the four walls of his cell, prisoner 14 asked himself pretty nearly the same questions, and he, for his part, was not stimulated by idle curiosity, but by real uneasiness, by constant anxiety. He felt himself irrevocably alone, with impotent hands, an impotent will, an impotent brain. It availed him nothing that he was able, ingenious, fearless, heroic. The struggle was being carried on without him. His part was now finished. He had joined all the pieces and set all the springs of the great machine that was to produce, that was, in a manner of speaking, automatically to manufacture his liberty, and it was impossible for him to make a single movement to improve and supervise his handiwork. At the date fixed, the machine would start working. Between now and then, 1,000 adverse incidents might spring up, 1,000 obstacles arise, without his having the means to combat those incidents or remove those obstacles. Lupin spent the unhappiest hours of his life at that time. He doubted himself. He wondered whether his existence would be buried for good in the horror of a jail. Had he not made a mistake in his calculations? Was it not childish to believe that the event that was to set him free would happen on the appointed date? "Madness!" he cried. "My argument is false. How can I expect such a concurrence of circumstances? There will be some little fact that will destroy all, the inevitable grain of sand." Steinweg's death and the disappearance of the documents which the old man was to make over to him did not trouble him greatly. The documents he could have done without, in case of need, and with the few words which Steinweg had told him, he was able, by dint of guesswork and his native genius, to reconstruct what the Emperor's letters contained, and to draw up the plan of battle that would lead to victory. But he thought of Holmlock Shears, who was over there now, in the very center of the battlefield, and who was seeking and who would find the letters, thus demolishing the edifice so patiently built up. And he thought of the other one, the implacable enemy, lurking round the prison, hidden in the prison perhaps, who guessed his most secret plans even before they were hatched in the mystery of his thought. The 17th of August, the 18th of August, the 19th, 2 more days, 2 centuries rather. Oh, the interminable minutes! Lupin, usually so calm, so entirely master of himself, so ingenious at providing matter for his own amusement, was feverish, exultant, and depressed by turns, powerless against the enemy, mistrusting everything and everybody. Morose. The 20th of August. He would have wished to act, and he could not. Whatever he did, it was impossible for him to hasten the hour of the catastrophe. This catastrophe would take place, or would not take place, but Lupin would not know for certain until the last hour of the last day was spent to the last minute. Then, and then alone, he would know of the definite failure of his scheme. The inevitable failure, he kept on repeating to himself. Success depends upon circumstances far too subtle and can be obtained only by methods far too psychological. There is no doubt that I am deceiving myself as to the value and the range of my weapons. And yet, hope returned to him. He weighed his chances. They suddenly seemed to him real and formidable. The fact was going to happen as he had foreseen it happening, and for the very reasons which he had expected. It was inevitable. Yes, inevitable. Unless, indeed, Shears discovered the hiding place. And again he thought of Shears, and again an immense sense of discouragement overwhelmed him. The last day. He woke late after a night of bad dreams. He saw nobody that day, neither the examining magistrate nor his counsel. The afternoon dragged along slowly and dismally, and the evening came, the murky evening of the cells. He was in a fever. His heart beat in his chest like the clapper of a bell. And the minutes passed, irretrievably. At 9 o'clock, nothing. At 10 o'clock, nothing. With all his nerves tense as the string of a bow, he listened to the vague prison sounds, tried to catch through those inexorable walls all that might trickle in from the life outside. Oh, how he would have liked to stay the march of time, and to give destiny a little more leisure. But what was the good? Was everything not finished? Oh, he cried, I am going mad. If all this were only over, that would be better. I can begin again differently. I shall try something else. But I can't go on like this. I can't go on. He held his head in his hands, pressing it with all his might, locking himself within himself, and concentrating his whole mind upon one subject, as though he wished to provoke, as though he wished to create the formidable, stupefying, inadmissible event to which he had attached his independence and his fortune. It must happen, he muttered. It must, and it must, not because I wish it, but because it is logical. And it shall happen. It shall happen. He beat his skull with his fists, and delirious words rose to his lips. The key grated in the lock. In his frenzy, he had not heard the sound of footsteps in the corridor, and now, suddenly, a ray of light penetrated into his cell, and the door opened. 3 men entered. Lupin had not a moment of surprise. The unheard-of miracle was being worked, and this at once seemed to him natural and normal, in perfect agreement with truth and justice. But a rush of pride flooded his whole being. At this minute he really received a clear sensation of his own strength and intelligence. "Shall I switch on the light?" asked one of the 3 men, in whom Lupin recognized the governor of the prison. "No," replied the taller of his companions, speaking in a foreign accent. This lantern will do. Shall I go? Act according to your duty, sir, said the same individual. My instructions from the prefect of police are to comply entirely with your wishes. In that case, sir, it would be preferable that you should withdraw. And Borelli went away, leaving the door half open, and remained outside within call. The visitor exchanged a few words with the one who had not yet spoken, and Lupin vainly tried to distinguish his features in the shade. He saw only two dark forms, clad in wide motoring cloaks and wearing caps with the flaps lowered.
"Are you Arsène Lupin?"
asked the man, turning the light of the lantern full on his face. He smiled. "Yes, I am the person known as Arsène Lupin, at present a prisoner in the Santé, cell 14, 2nd Division. Was it you," continued the visitor, "who published in the Grand Journal a series of more or less fanciful notes in which there is a question of a so-called collection of letters?" Quote. Lupin interrupted him. "I beg your pardon, sir, but before pursuing this conversation, the object of which, between ourselves, is none too clear to me, I should be much obliged if you would tell me to whom I have the honor of speaking." "Absolutely unnecessary," replied the stranger. "Absolutely essential," declared Lupin. "Why?" "For reasons of politeness, sir. You know my name, and I do not know yours. This implies a disregard of good form, which I cannot suffer." The stranger lost patience. "The mere fact that the governor of the prison brought us here shows that Monsieur Borelli does not know his manners," said Lupin. "M. Borelli should have introduced us to each other. We are equals here, sir. It is no case of a superior and an inferior, of a prisoner and a visitor who condescends to come and see him. There are two men here, and one of those two men has a hat on his head, which he ought not to have. Now look here." "Take the lesson as you please, sir," said Lupin. The stranger came closer to him and tried to speak. "The hat first," said Lupin. "The hat. You shall listen to me." "No." "Yes." "No." Matters were becoming virulent, stupidly. The second stranger, the one who had kept silent, placed his hand on his companion's shoulder and said, in German, "Leave him to me." Why, it was understood. "Hush, and go away." "Leaving you alone?" "Yes." "But the door?" "Shut it and walk away." "But this man, you know who he is." "Arsène Lupin." "Go away." The other went out, cursing under his breath. "Pull the door," cried the second visitor. "Harder than that." "All together." "That's right." Then he turned, took the lantern and raised it slowly. "Shall I tell you who I am?" he asked. "No," replied Lupin. "And why?" "Because I know." "Ah! You are the visitor I was expecting." "I?" "Yes, sire." Chapter 11. Charlemagne. "Silence," said the stranger sharply. "Don't use that word." "Then what shall I call your—" "Call me nothing." They were both silent, and this moment of respite was not one of those which go before the struggle of two adversaries ready for the fray. The stranger strode to and fro with the air of a master, accustomed to command and to be obeyed. Lupin stood motionless. He had abandoned his usual provocative attitude and his sarcastic smile. He waited, gravely and deferentially, but, down in the depths of his being, he reveled, eagerly, madly, in the marvelous situation in which he found himself placed. Here, in his cell, he, a prisoner, he, the adventurer, he, the swindler, the burglar, he, Arsène Lupin, face to face with that demigod of the modern world, that formidable entity, the heir of Caesar and of Charlemagne. He was intoxicated for a moment with the sense of his own power. The tears came to his eyes when he thought of his triumph. The stranger stood still, and at once, with the very first sentence, they came to the immediate point. Tomorrow is the 22nd of August. The letters are to be published tomorrow, are they not? Tonight, in 2 hours from now, my friends are to hand in to the Grand Journal, not the letters themselves, but an exact list of the letters, with the Grand Duke Hermann's annotations. That list shall not be handed in. It shall not be. You will give it to me. It shall be placed in the hands of in your hands. Likewise, all the letters? Likewise, all the letters. Without any of them being photographed. Without any of them being photographed. The stranger spoke in a very calm voice, containing not the least accent of entreaty, nor the least inflection of authority. He neither ordered nor requested. He stated the inevitable actions of Arsène Lupin. Things would happen as he said, and they would happen, whatever Arsène Lupin's demands should be, at whatever price he might value the performance of those actions. The conditions were accepted beforehand. By Jove, said Lupin to himself, that's jolly clever of him. If he leaves it to my generosity, I am a ruined man. The very way in which the conversation opened, the frankness of the words employed, the charm of voice and manner, all pleased him infinitely. He pulled himself together, lest he should relent and abandon all the advantages which he had conquered so fiercely. And the stranger continued, Have you read the letters? No. But someone you know has read them? No. In that case, I have the Grand Duke's list and his notes. Moreover, I know the hiding place where he put all his papers. Why did you not take them before this? I did not know the secret of the hiding place until I came here. My friends are on the way there now. The castle is guarded. It is occupied by 200 of my most trusty men. 10,000 would not be sufficient. After a minute's reflection, the visitor asked, How do you know the secret? I guessed it. But you had other elements of information which the papers did not publish? No, none at all. And yet, I had the castle searched for 4 days. Holmlock shears looked in the wrong place. Ah, said the stranger to himself. It's an odd thing. An odd thing. ... Quote. And to Lupin, you are sure that your supposition is correct? It is not a supposition. It is a certainty. So much the better, muttered the visitor. There will be no rest until those papers cease to exist. And placing himself in front of Arsène Lupin, How much? What? Said Lupin, taken aback. How much for the papers? How much do you ask to reveal the secret? He waited for Lupin to name a figure. He suggested one himself. 50,000? 100,000. And when Lupin did not reply, he said with a little hesitation, More? 200,000? Very well. I agree. Lupin smiled, and in a low voice said, It is a handsome figure, but is it not likely that some sovereign, let us say, the King of England, would give as much as 1,000,000? In all sincerity? I believe so, and that those letters are priceless to the Emperor, that they are worth 2,000,000 quite as easily as 200,000 francs, 3,000,000 as easily as 2? I think so. And if necessary, the Emperor would give that 3,000,000 francs? Yes. Then it will not be difficult to come to an arrangement. On that basis, cried the stranger, not without some alarm. Lupin smiled again. On that basis, no. I am not looking for money. I want something else, something that is worth more to me than any number of millions. What is that? My liberty. What? Your liberty. But I can do nothing. That concerns your country, the law. I have no power. Lupin went up to him, and, lowering his voice still more, You have every power, sire. My liberty is not such an exceptional event that they are likely to refuse you. Then I should have to ask for it? Yes. Of whom? Of Valanglais, the Prime Minister. But Monsieur Valanglais himself can do no more than I. He can open the doors of this prison for me. It would cause a public outcry. When I say open, half open would be enough. We should counterfeit an escape. The public so thoroughly expects it that it would not so much as ask for an explanation. Very well, but Monsieur Valanglais will never consent. He will consent. Why? Because you will express the wish. My wishes are not commands to him, no, but an opportunity of making himself agreeable to the Emperor by fulfilling them. And Valanglais is too shrewd a politician. Nonsense. Do you imagine that the French government will commit so illegal an act for the sole pleasure of making itself agreeable to me? That pleasure will not be the sole one. What will be the other? The pleasure of serving France by accepting the proposal which will accompany the request for my release. I am to make a proposal? I? Yes, sire. What proposal? I do not know. But it seems to me that there is always a favorable ground on which to come to an understanding. There are possibilities of agreement. The stranger looked at him, without grasping his meaning. Lupin leant forward, and as though seeking his words, as though putting an imaginary case, said, "Let me suppose that two great countries are divided by some insignificant question, that they have different points of view on a matter of secondary importance, a colonial matter, for instance, in which their self-esteem is at stake rather than their interest. Is it inconceivable that the ruler of one of those countries might come of his own accord to treat this matter in a new spirit of conciliation, and give the necessary instructions so that I might leave Morocco to France?" said the stranger, with a burst of laughter. The idea which Lupin was suggesting struck him as the most comical thing that he had ever heard, and he laughed heartily. The disparity was so great between the object aimed at and the means proposed. Of course, he resumed, with a vain attempt to recover his seriousness. Of course, it's a very original idea. The whole of modern politics upset so that Arsène Lupin may be free. The plans of the Empire destroyed so that Arsène Lupin may continue his exploits. Why not ask me for Alsace and Lorraine at once? I did think of it, sire, replied Lupin calmly. The stranger's merriment increased. Splendid! And you let me off? This time, yes. Lupin had crossed his arms. He too was amusing himself by exaggerating the part which he was playing, and he continued, with affected seriousness. A series of circumstances might one day arise which would put in my hands the power of demanding and obtaining that restitution. When that day comes, I shall certainly not fail to do so. For the moment, the weapons at my disposal oblige me to be more modest. Peace in Morocco will satisfy me. Just that. Morocco against your liberty. Nothing more, or rather, for we must not lose sight entirely of the main object of this conversation, or rather, a little goodwill on the part of one of the countries in question, and, in exchange, the surrender of the letters which are in my power. Those letters, muttered the stranger irritably. After all, perhaps they are not so valuable. There are some in your own hands, sire, and you considered them valuable enough to come to this cell. Well, what does it matter? But there are others of which you do not know the authorship, and about which I can give you a few particulars. Oh, indeed, said the stranger, rather anxiously. Lupin hesitated. Speak plainly, said the stranger. Say what you have in your mind. In the profound silence of the cell, Lupin declared with a certain solemnity, 20 years ago, a draft treaty was prepared between Germany, Great Britain, and France. That's not true. It's impossible. Who could have done such a thing? The Emperor's father and the Queen of England, his grandmother, both acting under the influence of the Empress Frederick. Impossible! I repeat, it is impossible. The correspondence is in the hiding place at Velden's castle, and I alone know the secret of the hiding place. The stranger walked up and down with an agitated step. Then he stopped short. Is the text of the treaty included in that correspondence? Yes, sire. It is in your father's own hand. And what does it say? By that treaty, France and Great Britain granted and promised Germany an immense colonial empire, the empire which she does not at present possess, and which has become a necessity to her, in these times, to ensure her greatness. And what did England demand as a set-off against that empire? The limitation of the German fleet. And France? Alsace and Lorraine. The emperor leant against the table in silent thought. Lupin continued. Everything was ready. The cabinets of Paris and London had been sounded and had consented. The thing was practically done. The great treaty of alliance was on the point of being concluded. It would have laid the foundations of a definite and universal peace. The death of your father destroyed that sublime dream. But I ask your Imperial Majesty, what will your people think? What will the world think when it knows that Frederick III, one of the heroes of 1870, a German, a pure and loyal German, respected by all, generally admired for his nobility of character, agreed to the restitution of Alsace-Lorraine, and therefore considered that restitution just? He was silent for an instant, leaving the problem to fix itself in its precise terms before the emperor's conscience, before his conscience as a man, a son, and a sovereign. Then he concluded, Your Imperial Majesty yourself must know whether you wish or do not wish history to record the existence of that treaty. As for me, sire, you can see that my humble personality counts for very little in the discussion. A long pause followed upon Lupin's words. He waited, with his soul torn with anguish. His whole destiny was at stake, in this minute which he had conceived, and in a manner produced with such effort and such stubbornness, an historic minute, born of his brain, in which his humble personality, for all that he might say, weighed heavily upon the fate of empires and the peace of the world. Opposite him, in the shadow, Caesar stood meditating. What answer would he make? What solution would he give to the problem? He walked across the cell for a few moments, which to Lupin seemed interminable. Then he stopped and asked, Are there any other conditions? Yes, sire, but they are insignificant. Name them. I have found the son of the Grand Duke of Zweibrücken-Veldenz. The Grand Duchy must be restored to him. Anything else? He loves a young girl who loves him in her turn. She is the fairest and the most virtuous of her sex. He must marry her. Anything else? That is all. There is nothing more? Nothing. Your Majesty need only have this letter delivered to the editor of the Grand Journal, who will then destroy, unread, the article which he may now receive at any moment. Lupin held out the letter, with a heavy heart and a trembling hand. If the emperor took it, that would be a sign of his acceptance. The emperor hesitated, and then, with an abrupt movement, took the letter, put on his hat, wrapped his cloak round him, and walked out without a word. Lupin remained for a few seconds, staggering, as though dazed. Then, suddenly, he fell into his chair, shouting with joy and pride. Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction, I am sorry to say goodbye to you today. Why, Monsieur Lupin? Are you thinking of leaving us? With the greatest reluctance, I assure you, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction. Our relations have been so very pleasant and cordial, but all good things must come to an end. My cure at the Santé Palace is finished. Other duties call me. I have resolved to make my escape tonight. Then I wish you good luck, Monsieur Lupin. 1,000 thanks, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction. Arsène Lupin waited patiently for the hour of his escape, not without asking himself how it would be contrived and by what means France and Germany, uniting for the joint performance of this deserving work, would succeed in effecting it without creating too great a scandal. Late in the afternoon, the warder told him to go to the entrance yard. He hurried out and was met by the governor, who handed him over to M. Weber. Monsieur Weber made him step into a motor car in which somebody was already seated. Lupin had a violent fit of laughter. What, you, my poor old Weber? Have they let you in for this tiresome job? Are you to be responsible for my escape? Upon my word, you are an unlucky beggar. Oh, my poor old chap, what hard lines! First made famous through my arrest, you are now to become immortal through my escape. He looked at the other man. Well, well, Monsieur le Préfet de Police, so you are in the business too. That's a nasty thing for you, what? If you take my advice, you'll stay in the background and leave the honor and glory to Weber. It's his by right, and he can stand a lot, the rascal." The car traveled at a fast pace, along the Seine and through Boulogne. At St. Cloud they crossed the river. "Splendid!" cried Lupin. "We're going to Garches. You want me there, in order to reenact the death of Altenheim. We shall go down into the underground passage. I shall disappear, and people will say that I got through another outlet, known to myself alone. Lord, how idiotic!" He seemed quite unhappy about it. Idiotic. Idiotic in the highest degree. I blush for shame. And those are the people who govern us. What an age to live in! But you poor devils, why didn't you come to me? I'd have invented a beautiful little escape for you, something of a miraculous nature. I had it already pigeonholed in my mind. The public would have yelled with wonder and danced with delight. Instead of which, however, it's quite true that you were given rather short notice. But all the same, the program was exactly as Lupin had foreseen. They walked through the grounds of the House of Retreat to the Pavillon Hortense. Lupin and his two companions went down the stairs and along the underground passage. At the end of the tunnel, the deputy chief said, "You are free." "And there you are," said Lupin. "Is that all? Well, my dear Weber, thank you very much, and sorry to have given you so much trouble. Goodbye, Monsieur le Préfet. Kind regards to the missus." He climbed the stairs that led to the Villa des Glycines, raised the trap-door, and sprang into the room. A hand fell on his shoulder. Opposite him stood his first visitor of the day before, the one who had accompanied the Emperor. There were 4 men with him, 2 on either side. "Look here," said Lupin, "what's the meaning of this joke? I thought I was free." "Yes, yes," growled the German in his rough voice. "You are free. Free to travel with the 5 of us, if that suits you." Lupin looked at him for a second, with a mad longing to hit him on the nose, just to teach him. But the 5 men looked devilish determined. Their leader did not betray any exaggerated fondness for him, and it seemed to him that the fellow would be only too pleased to resort to extreme measures. Besides, after all, what did he care? He chuckled. "If it suits me, why, it's the dream of my life." A powerful covered car was waiting in the paved yard outside the villa. 2 men got into the driver's seat, 2 others inside, with their backs to the motor. Lupin and the stranger sat down on the front seat. "Vorwärts!" cried Lupin in German. "Vorwärts nach Veldenz," the stranger said. "Silence! Those men must know nothing. Speak French. They don't know French. But why speak at all?" "Quite right," said Lupin to himself. Why speak at all? The car traveled all the evening and all night without any incident. Twice they stopped to take in petrol at some sleepy little town. The Germans took it in turns to watch their prisoner, who did not open his eyes until the early morning. They stopped for breakfast at an inn on a hillside, near which stood a signpost. Lupin saw that they were at an equal distance from Metz and Luxembourg. From there, they took a road that slanted northeast, in the direction of Treves. Lupin said to his traveling companion, "Am I right in believing that I have the honor of speaking to Count von Waldemar, the Emperor's confidential friend, the one who searched Hermann III's house in Dresden?" The stranger remained silent. "You're the sort of chap I can't stand at any price," muttered Lupin. "I'll have some fun with you one of these days. You're ugly, you're fat, you're heavy. In short, I don't like you." And he added aloud, "You are wrong not to answer me, Monsieur le Comte. I was speaking in your own interest. Just as we were stepping in, I saw a motor come into sight, behind us, on the horizon. Did you see it?" "No." "Why?" "Nothing." "Still, no, nothing at all. A mere remark. Besides, we are 10 minutes ahead, and our car is at least of 40 horsepower. "It's a 60, said the German, looking at him uneasily from the corner of his eye. "Oh, then we're all right." They were climbing a little slope. When they reached the top, the Count leant out of the window. "Damn it all!" he swore. "What's the matter?" asked Lupin. The Count turned to him and, in a threatening voice, "Take care! If anything happens, it will be so much the worse for you." "Oh ho! It seems the other's gaining on us. But what are you afraid of, my dear Count?" "It's no doubt a traveler, perhaps even someone they are sending to help us." "I don't want any help," growled the German. He leant out again. The car was only 200 or 300 yards behind. He said to his men, pointing to Lupin, "Bind him, if he resists." He drew his revolver. "Why should I resist, O gentle Teuton?" chuckled Lupin, and he added, while they were fastening his hands, "It is really curious to see how people take precautions when they need not, and don't when they ought to. What the devil do you care about that motor? Accomplices of mine? What an idea!" Without replying, the German gave orders to the driver. "To the right. Slow down. Let them pass. If they slow down also, stop." But to his great surprise, the motor seemed, on the contrary, to increase its speed. It passed in front of the car like a whirlwind in a cloud of dust. Standing up at the back, leaning over the hood, which was lowered, was a man dressed in black. He raised his arm. 2 shots rang out. The Count, who was blocking the whole of the left window, fell back into the car. Before even attending to him, the 2 men leapt upon Lupin and finished securing him. "Jackasses! Blockheads!" shouted Lupin, shaking with rage. "Let me go! On the contrary! There now, we're stopping. But go after him, you silly fools! Catch him up! It's the man in black, I tell you, the murderer! Oh, the idiots! ... They gagged him. Then they attended to the Count. The wound did not appear to be serious, and was soon dressed. But the patient, who was in a very excited state, had an attack of fever and became delirious. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. They were in the open country, far from any village. The men had no information as to the exact object of the journey. Where were they to go? Whom were they to send to? They drew up the motor beside a wood and waited. The whole day went by in this way. It was evening before a squad of cavalry arrived, dispatched from Treves in search of the motor car. 2 hours later, Lupin stepped out of the car, and still escorted by his 2 Germans, by the light of a lantern climbed the steps of a staircase that led to a small room with iron-barred windows. Here he spent the night. The next morning an officer led him through a courtyard filled with soldiers to the center of a long row of buildings that ran round the foot of a mound covered with monumental ruins. He was shown into a large, hastily furnished room. His visitor of 2 days back was sitting at a writing table, reading newspapers and reports, which he marked with great strokes of red pencil. "Leave us," he said to the officer. And, going up to Lupin, "The papers." The tone was no longer the same. It was now the harsh and imperious tone of the master who is at home and addressing an inferior. And such an inferior! A rogue, an adventurer of the worst type, before whom he had been obliged to humiliate himself. "The papers," he repeated. Lupin was not put out of countenance. He said quite calmly, "They are in Velden's castle. We are in the outbuildings of the castle. Those are the ruins of Velden's over there. The papers are in the ruins. Let us go to them. Show me the way." Lupin did not budge. "Well?" "Well, sire, it is not as simple as you think. It takes some time to bring into play the elements which are needed to open that hiding place." "How long do you want?" 24 hours. An angry movement quickly suppressed. "Oh, there was no question of that between us. Nothing was specified, neither that nor the little trip which your Imperial Majesty made me take in the charge of half a dozen of your bodyguard. I am to hand over the papers, that is all. And I am not to give you your liberty until you do hand over those papers. It is a question of confidence, sire. I should have considered myself quite as much bound to produce the papers if I had been free on leaving prison, and your Imperial Majesty may be sure that I should not have walked off with them. The only difference is that they would now be in your possession, for we have lost a day, sire. And a day in this business is a day too much. Only there it is. You should have had confidence." The emperor gazed with a certain amazement at that outcast, that vagabond, who seemed vexed that anyone should doubt his word. He did not reply, but rang the bell. "The officer on duty," he commanded. Count von Waldemar appeared, looking very white. "Ah, it's you, Waldemar. So you're all right again?" "At your service, sire." "Take 5 men with you. The same men, as you're sure of them. Don't leave this gentleman until tomorrow morning." He looked at his watch. "Until tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. No. I will give him till 12. You will go wherever he thinks fit to go. You will do whatever he tells you to do. In short, you are at his disposal. At 12 o'clock I will join you. If, at the last stroke of 12, he has not handed me the bundle of letters, you will put him back in your car and, without losing a second, take him straight to the Santé prison. If he tries to escape, ... take your own course." He went out. Lupin helped himself to a cigar from the table and threw himself into an easy-chair. "Good. I just love that way of going to work. It is frank and explicit." The Count had brought in his men. He said to Lupin, "March!" Lupin lit his cigar and did not move. "Bind his hands," said the Count. And, when the order was executed, he repeated, "Now then, march!" "No." "What do you mean by no?" "I'm wondering." "What about? Where on earth that hiding place can be?" The Count gave a start, and Lupin chuckled. "For the best part of the story is that I have not the remotest idea where that famous hiding place is, nor how to set about discovering it. What do you say to that, my dear Voldemar, eh? Funny, isn't it? Not the very remotest idea. ... Chapter 12. The Emperor's Letters. The ruins of Veldenz are well known to all who visit the banks of the Rhine and the Moselle. They comprise the remains of the old feudal castle, built in 1377 by the Archbishop of Fistingen, an enormous dungeon keep gutted by Turenne's troops, and the walls, left standing in their entirety, of a large Renaissance palace, in which the Grand Dukes of Zweibrücken lived for 3 centuries. It was this palace that was sacked by Hermann II's rebellious subjects. The empty windows display 200 yawning cavities on the 4 frontages. All the wainscoting, the hangings, and most of the furniture were burnt. You walk on the scorched girders of the floors, and the sky can be seen at intervals through the ruined ceilings. Lupin, accompanied by his escort, went over the whole building in 2 hours' time. I am very pleased with you, my dear Count. I don't think I ever came across a guide so well posted in his subject, nor, which is rare, so silent. And now, if you don't mind, we will go to lunch." As a matter of fact, Lupin knew no more than at the first moment, and his perplexity did nothing but increase. To obtain his release from prison and to strike the imagination of his visitor, he had bluffed, pretending to know everything, and he was still seeking for the best place at which to begin to seek. "Things look bad," he said to himself from time to time. "Things are looking about as bad as they can look." His brain, moreover, was not as clear as usual. He was obsessed by an idea, the idea of the other one, the murderer, the assassin, whom he knew to be still clinging to his footsteps. How did that mysterious personality come to be on his tracks? How had he heard of Lupin's leaving prison and of his rush to Luxembourg in Germany? Was it a miraculous intuition, or was it the outcome of definite information? But, if so, at what price, by means of what promises or threats, was he able to obtain it? All these questions haunted Lupin's mind. At about 4 o'clock, however, after a fresh walk through the ruins, in the course of which he had examined the stones, measured the thickness of the walls, investigated the shape and appearance of things, all to no purpose, he asked the Count, Is there no one left who was in the service of the last Grand Duke who lived in the castle? All the servants of that time went different ways. Only one of them continued to live in the district. Well, he died 2 years ago. Any children? He had a son, who married and who was dismissed, with his wife, for disgraceful conduct. They left their youngest child behind, a little girl, Isilda. Where does she live? She lives here, at the end of these buildings. The old grandfather used to act as a guide to visitors, in the days when the castle was still open to the public. Little Isilda has lived in the ruins ever since. She was allowed to remain out of pity. She is a poor innocent, who is hardly able to talk, and does not know what she says. Was she always like that? It seems not. Her reason went gradually when she was about 10 years old. In consequence of a sorrow? Of a fright? No, for no direct cause, I am told. The father was a drunkard, and the mother committed suicide in a fit of madness. Lupin reflected and said, "I should like to see her." The Count gave a rather curious smile. "You can see her, by all means." She happened to be in one of the rooms which had been set apart for her. Lupin was surprised to find an attractive little creature, too thin, too pale, but almost pretty, with her fair hair and her delicate face. Her sea-green eyes had the vague, dreamy look of the eyes of blind people. He put a few questions to which Isilda gave no answer, and others to which she replied with incoherent sentences, as though she understood neither the meaning of the words addressed to her, nor those which she herself uttered. He persisted, taking her very gently by the hand, and asking her in an affectionate tone about the time when she still had her reason, about her grandfather, about the memories which might be called up by her life, as a child playing freely among the majestic ruins of the castle. She stood silent, with staring eyes, impassive. Any emotion which she might have felt was not enough to rouse her slumbering intelligence. Lupin asked for a pencil and paper, and wrote down the number 813. The Count smiled again. "Look here, what are you laughing at?" cried Lupin irritably. "Nothing. Nothing. I'm very much interested, that's all." Isilda looked at the sheet of paper, when he showed it to her, and turned away her head with a vacant air. "No bite," said the Count satirically. Lupin wrote the letters APOON. Isilda paid no more attention than before. He did not give up the experiment, but kept on writing the same letters, each time watching the girl's face. She did not stir, but kept her eyes fixed on the paper with an indifference which nothing seemed to disturb. Then, all at once, she seized the pencil, snatched the last sheet out of Lupin's hands, and, as though acting under a sudden inspiration, wrote 2 L's in the middle of a space left open by Lupin. He felt a thrill. A word had been formed. Apollon. Meanwhile, Isilda clung to both pencil and paper, and, with clutching fingers and a strained face, was struggling to make her hand submit to the hesitating orders of her poor little brain. Lupin waited, feverishly. She rapidly wrote another word, the word Diane. "Another word! Another word!" shouted Lupin. She twisted her fingers round the pencil, broke the lead, made a big J with the stump, and now, utterly exhausted, dropped the pencil. "Another word!" "I must have another word," said Lupin, in a tone of command, catching her by the arm. But he saw by her eyes, which had once more become indifferent, that that fleeting gleam of intelligence could not shine out again. "Let us go," he said. He was walking away when she ran after him and stood in his path. He stopped. "What is it?" She held out the palm of her hand. "What? Money?" "Is she in the habit of begging?" he asked the Count. "No," said Waldemar, "and I can't understand." Isilda took 2 gold coins from her pocket and chinked them together, gleefully. Lupin looked at them. They were French coins, quite new, bearing the date of that year. "Where did you get these?" asked Lupin excitedly. "French money? Who gave it you? And when?" Was it today? Speak! Answer! He shrugged his shoulders. Fool that I am! As though she could answer. My dear Count, would you mind lending me 40 marks? Thanks. Here, Isilda. That's for you. She took the 2 coins, jingled them with the others in the palm of her hand, and then, putting out her arm, pointed to the ruins of the Renaissance palace, with a gesture that seemed to call attention more particularly to the left wing and to the top of that wing. Was it a mechanical movement, or must it be looked upon as a grateful acknowledgment for the 2 gold coins? He glanced at the Count. Waldemar was smiling again. What makes the brute keep on grinning like that? Said Lupin to himself. Anyone would think that he was having a game with me. He went to the palace on the off chance, attended by his escort. The ground floor consisted of a number of large reception rooms, running one into the other and containing the few pieces of furniture that had escaped the fire. On the first floor, on the north side, was a long gallery, out of which 12 handsome rooms opened all exactly alike. There was a similar gallery on the second floor, but with 24 smaller rooms, also resembling one another. All these apartments were empty, dilapidated, wretched to look at. Above there was nothing. The attics had been burnt down. For an hour Lupin walked, ran, rushed about indefatigably, with his eyes on the lookout. When it began to grow dusk, he hurried to one of his 12 rooms on the first floor, as if he were selecting it for special reasons known to himself alone. He was rather surprised to find the Emperor there, smoking and seated in an armchair which he had sent for. Taking no notice of his presence, Lupin began an inspection of the room, according to the methods which he was accustomed to employ in such cases, dividing the room into sections, each of which he examined in turn. After 20 minutes of this work, he said, I must beg you, sire, to be good enough to move. There is a fireplace here. The Emperor tossed his head. Is it really necessary for me to move? Yes, sire. This fireplace. The fireplace is just the same as the others, and the room is no different from its fellows. Lupin looked at the Emperor without understanding. The Emperor rose and said with a laugh, I think, Monsieur Lupin, that you have been making just a little fun of me. How do you mean, sire? Oh, it's hardly worth mentioning. You obtained your release on the condition of handing me certain papers in which I am interested, and you have not the smallest notion as to where they are. I have been thoroughly, what do you call it in French? Roulé done. Do you think so, sire? Why, what a man knows he doesn't have to hunt for. And you have been hunting for 10 good hours. Doesn't it strike you as a case for an immediate return to prison? Lupin seemed thunderstruck. Did not your Imperial Majesty fix 12 o'clock tomorrow as the last limit? Why wait? Why? Well, to allow me to complete my work. Your work? But it's not even begun, Monsieur Lupin. There your Imperial Majesty is mistaken. Prove it. And I will wait until tomorrow. Lupin reflected, and, speaking in a serious tone, Since your Imperial Majesty requires proofs in order to have confidence in me, I will furnish them. The 12 rooms leading out of this gallery each bear a different name, which is inscribed in French, obviously by a French decorative artist, over the various doors. One of the inscriptions, less damaged by the fire than the others, caught my eye as I was passing along the gallery. I examined the other doors. All of them bore hardly legible traces of names caned over the pediments. Thus I found a D and an E, the first and last letters of Diane. I found an A and LO1, which pointed to Apollon. These are the French equivalents of Diana and Apollo, both of them mythological deities. The other inscriptions presented similar characteristics. I discovered traces of such names as Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, Saturn, and so on. This part of the problem was solved. Each of the 12 rooms bears the name of an Olympian god or goddess, and the letters APOON completed by Isilda, point to the Apollo room or salle d'Apollon. So it is here, in the room in which we now are, that the letters are hidden. A few minutes, perhaps, will suffice in which to discover them. A few minutes or a few years, or even longer, said the Emperor, laughing. He seemed greatly amused, and the Count also displayed a coarse merriment. Lupin asked, "Would your Imperial Majesty be good enough to explain, Monsieur Lupin, the exciting investigation which you have conducted today, and of which you are telling us the brilliant results, has already been made by me. Yes, a fortnight ago, in the company of your friend Holmlock Shears. Together we questioned little Isilda. Together we employed the same method in dealing with her that you did, and together we observed the names in the gallery and got as far as this room, the Apollo room." Lupin turned livid. He spluttered, "Oh, did Shears get as far as this?" "Yes, after 4 days searching. True, it did not help us, for we found nothing. All the same, I know that the letters are not here." Trembling with rage, wounded in his innermost pride, Lupin fired up under the jibe, as though he had been lashed with a whip. He had never felt humiliated to such a degree as this. In this fury, he could have strangled the fat Waldemar, whose laughter incensed him. Containing himself with an effort, he said, "It took Shears 4 days, sire, and me only 4 hours, and I should have required even less if I had not been thwarted in my search. And by whom, bless my soul? By my faithful Count. I hope he did not dare! Quote. No, sire, but by the most terrible and powerful of my enemies, by that infernal being who killed his own accomplice Altenheim." "Is he here?" "Do you think so?" exclaimed the Emperor, with an agitation which showed that he was familiar with every detail of the dramatic story. "He is wherever I am. He threatens me with his constant hatred. It was he who guessed that I was Monsieur Lenormand, the chief of the detective service. It was he who had me put in prison. It was he again who pursued me on the day when I came out. Yesterday, aiming at me in the motor, he wounded Count von Waldemar." "But how do you know? How can you be sure that he is at Veldenz?" "Isilda has received 2 gold coins, 2 French coins." "And what is he here for? With what object?" "I don't know, sire, but he is the very spirit of evil. Your Imperial Majesty must be on your guard. He is capable of anything and everything." "It is impossible. I have 200 men in the ruins. He cannot have entered. He would have been seen." "Someone has seen him, beyond a doubt." "Who?" "Isilda. Let her be questioned. Waldemar, take your prisoner to where the girl is." Lupin showed his bound hands. "It will be a tough battle. Can I fight like this?" The Emperor said to the Count, "Unfasten him, and keep me informed." In this way, by a sudden effort, bringing the hateful vision of the murder into the discussion, boldly, without evidence, Arsène Lupin gained time and resumed the direction of the search. 16 hours still, he said to himself. It's more than I want. He reached the premises occupied by Isilda, at the end of the old outbuildings. These buildings served as barracks for the 200 soldiers guarding the ruins, and the whole of this, the left wing, was reserved for the officers. Isilda was not there. The Count sent 2 of his men to look for her. They came back. No one had seen the girl. Nevertheless, she could not have left the precincts of the ruins. As for the Renaissance Palace, it was, so to speak, invested by 1/2 of the troops, and no one was able to obtain admittance. At last, the wife of a subaltern who lived in the next house declared that she had been sitting at her window all day, and that the girl had not been out. "If she hadn't gone out," said Waldemar, "she would be here now, and she is not here." Lupin observed, "Is there a floor above?" "Yes, but from this room to the upper floor there is no staircase." "Yes, there is." He pointed to a little door opening on a dark recess. In the shadow, he saw the first treads of a staircase as steep as a ladder. "Please, my dear Count," he said to Waldemar, who wanted to go up, "let me have the honor." "Why?" There's danger." He ran up and at once sprang into a low and narrow loft. A cry escaped him. "Oh!" "What is it?" asked the Count, emerging in his turn. "Here, on the floor. Isilda." He knelt down beside the girl, but, at the first glance, saw that she was simply stunned, and that she bore no trace of a wound, except a few scratches on the wrists and hands. A handkerchief was stuffed into her mouth by way of a gag. "That's it," he said. "The murderer was here with her. When we came, he struck her a blow with his fist and gagged her, so that we should not hear her moans." "But how did he get away?" "Through here. Look, there is a passage connecting all the attics on the first floor. And from there? From there he went down the stairs of one of the other dwellings." "But he would have been seen." "Pooh, who knows? The creature's invisible. Never mind. Send your men to look. Tell them to search all the attics and all the ground floor lodgings." He hesitated. Should he also go in pursuit of the murderer? But a sound brought him back to the girl's side. She had got up from the floor, and a dozen pieces of gold money had dropped from her hands. He examined them. They were all French. "Ah," he said, "I was right. Only, why so much gold? In reward for what?" Suddenly he caught sight of a book on the floor and stooped to pick it up. But the girl darted forward with a quicker movement, seized the book, and pressed it to her bosom with a fierce energy, as though prepared to defend it against any attempt to take hold of it. "That's it," he said. "The money was offered her for the book, but she refused to part with it, hence the scratches on the hands. The interesting thing would be to know why the murderer wished to possess the book. Was he able to look through it first?" He said to Waldemar, "My dear Count, please give the order." Waldemar made a sign to his men. 3 of them threw themselves on the girl, and after a hard tussle, in which the poor thing stamped, writhed, and screamed with rage, they took the volume from her. "Gently, child," said Lupin. "Be calm. It's all in a good cause. Keep an eye on her, will you? Meanwhile, I will have a look at the object in dispute." It was an odd volume of Montesquieu's Voyage au Temple de Guide, in a binding at least a century old. But Lupin had hardly opened it before he exclaimed, I say, this is queer. There is a sheet of parchment stuck on each right-hand page, and those sheets are covered with a very close, small handwriting." He read at the beginning, "Diary of the Chevalier Gilles de Malrèche, French servant to His Royal Highness the Prince of Zweibrücken-Veldenz, begun in the year of our Lord 1794. "What? Does it say that?" asked the Count. "What surprises you?" Isilda's grandfather, the old man who died 2 years ago, was called Malreich, which is the German form of the same name. Capital! Isilda's grandfather must have been the son or the grandson of the French servant who wrote his diary in an odd volume of Montesquieu's works. And that is how the diary came into Isilda's hands. He turned the pages at random. The 15th of September, 1796. His Royal Highness went hunting. The 20th of September, 1796. His Royal Highness went out riding. He was mounted on Cupidon. "By Jove," muttered Lupin, "so far it's not very exciting." He turned over a number of pages and read, "The 12th of March, 1803. I have remitted 10 crowns to Herman. He is giving music lessons in London." Lupin gave a laugh. "Oh ho, Herman is dethroned, and our respect comes down with a rush." "Yes," observed Waldemar, "the reigning Grand Duke was driven from his dominions by the French troops." Lupin continued, 1809, Tuesday. Napoleon slept at Veldenz last night. I made His Majesty's bed, and this morning I emptied his slops. Oh, did Napoleon stop at Veldenz? Yes, on his way back to the army, at the time of the Austrian campaign, which ended with the Battle of Wagram. It was an honor of which the Grand-Ducal family were very proud afterwards. Lupin went on reading. The 28th of October, 1814. His Royal Highness returned to his dominions, the 29th of October, 1814. I accompanied His Royal Highness to the hiding place last night, and was happy to be able to show him that no one had guessed its existence. For that matter, who would have suspected that a hiding place could be contrived in— Lupin stopped with a shout. Isilda had suddenly escaped from the men guarding her, made a grab at him and taken to flight, carrying the book with her. "Oh, the little mischief! Quick, you!" "Go round by the stairs below. I'll run after her by the passage." But she had slammed the door behind her and bolted it. He had to go down and run along the buildings with the others, looking for a staircase which would take them to the first floor. The fourth house was the only one open. He went upstairs, but the passage was empty, and he had to knock at doors, force locks, and make his way into unoccupied rooms, while Waldemar, showing as much ardor in the pursuit as himself, pricked the curtains and hangings with the point of his sword. A voice called out from the ground floor, "Towards the right wing." They rushed in that direction. It was one of the officers' wives, who beckoned to them at the end of a passage, and told them that the girl must be in her lodging. "How do you know?" asked Lupin. "I wanted to go to my room. The door was shut, and I could not get in." Lupin tried and found the door locked. "The window!" he cried. "There must be a window." He went outside, took the Count's sword and smashed the panes. Then, helped up by two men, he hung onto the wall, passed his arm through the broken glass, turned the latch, and stumbled into the room. He saw Isilda huddled before the fireplace, almost in the midst of the flames. "The little beast!" he said. "She has thrown it into the fire!" He pushed her back savagely, tried to take the book and burnt his hands in the attempt. Then, with the tongs, he pulled it out of the grate and threw the tablecloth over it to stifle the blaze. But it was too late. The pages of the old manuscript, all burnt up, were falling into ashes. Lupin gazed at her in silence. The Count said, "One would think that she knew what she was doing. No, she does not know. Only her grandfather must have entrusted her with that book as a sort of treasure, a treasure which no one was ever to set eyes on, and, with her stupid instinct, she preferred to throw it into the fire rather than part with it." "Well then, ... well then what?" "You won't find the hiding place." "Aha, my dear Count, so you did for a moment look upon my success as possible? And Lupin does not strike you as quite a charlatan? Make your mind easy, Waldemar. Lupin has more than one string to his bow. I shall succeed. Before 12 o'clock tomorrow?" "Before 12 o'clock tonight. But, for the moment, I am starving with hunger. And if your kindness would go so far, ... He was taken to the sergeant's mess and a substantial meal prepared for him, while the Count went to make his report to the Emperor. 20 minutes later, Waldemar returned, and they sat down and dined together, opposite each other, silent and pensive. "Waldemar, a good cigar would be a treat." "I thank you. Ah, this one crackles as a self-respecting Havana should." He lit a cigar, and, after a minute or two, "You can smoke, Count. I don't mind in the least. In fact, I rather like it." An hour passed. Waldemar dozed and, from time to time, swallowed a glass of brandy to wake himself up. Soldiers passed in and out, waiting on them. "Coffee?" asked Lupin. They brought him some coffee. "What bad stuff," he grumbled. "If that's what Caesar drinks—" "Give me another cup all the same, Waldemar. We may have a long night before us." "Oh, what vile coffee!" He lit a second cigar and did not say another word. 10 minutes passed. He continued not to move or speak. Suddenly Waldemar sprang to his feet and said to Lupin angrily, "Hi! Stand up there!" Lupin was whistling a tune at the moment. He kept on whistling, peacefully. "Stand up, I say!" Lupin turned round. His Imperial Majesty had just entered. Lupin rose from his chair. "How far are we?" asked the Emperor. "I think, sire, that I shall be able to satisfy your Imperial Majesty soon." "What? Do you know the hiding place? Very nearly, sire. A few details still escape me, but everything will be cleared up once we are on the spot. I have no doubt of it. Are we to stay here? No, sire. I will beg you to go with me to the Renaissance Palace, but we have plenty of time, and, if your Imperial Majesty will permit me, I should like first to think over 2 or 3 points. Without waiting for the reply, he sat down, to Waldemar's great indignation. In a few minutes, the Emperor, who had walked away and was talking to the Count, came up to him. "Are you ready now, Monsieur Lupin?" Lupin kept silence. A fresh question. His head fell on his chest. "But he's asleep. I really believe that he's asleep." Waldemar, beside himself with rage, shook him violently by the shoulder. Lupin fell from his chair, sank to the floor, gave 2 or 3 convulsive movements, and then lay quite still. "What's the matter with him?" exclaimed the Emperor. "He's not dead, I hope." He took a lamp and bent over him. "How pale he is! A face like wax! Look, Waldemar. Feel his heart. He's alive, is he not?" "Yes, sire," said the Count after a moment. "The heart is beating quite regularly." "Then what is it? I don't understand. What happened?" "Shall I go and fetch the doctor?" "Yes, run." The doctor found Lupin in the same state, lying inert and quiet. He had him put on a bed, subjected him to a long examination, and asked what he had had to eat. "Do you suspect a case of poisoning, doctor?" "No, sire. There are no traces of poisoning. But I am thinking, what's on that tray and in that cup?" "Coffee," said the Count. "For you?" "No, for him. I did not have any." The doctor poured out some coffee, tasted it, and said, "I was right. He has been put to sleep with a narcotic." "But by whom?" cried the Emperor angrily. "Look here, Waldemar, it's exasperating, the way things happen in this place." "Sire?" ... Well, yes, I've had enough of it. I am really beginning to believe that the man's right, and that there is someone in the castle. That French money, that narcotic... ... If anyone had got into this enclosure, sire, it would be known by this time. We've been hunting in every direction for 3 hours. Still, I didn't make the coffee, I assure you, and unless you did... ... "Oh, sire! Well then, hunt about, search. You have 200 men at your disposal, and the outhouses are not so large as all that. For after all, the ruffian is prowling round here, round these buildings, near the kitchen, somewhere or other. Go and bustle about." The fat Waldemar bustled about all night, conscientiously, because it was the master's order, but without conviction, because it was impossible for a stranger to hide among ruins which were so well watched. And, as a matter of fact, the event proved that he was right. The investigations were fruitless, and no one was able to discover the mysterious hand that had prepared the narcotic drink. Lupin spent the night lifeless on his bed. In the morning, the doctor, who had not left his side, told a messenger of the Emperor's that he was still asleep. At 9 o'clock, however, he made his first movement, a sort of effort to wake up. Later on, he stammered, "What time is it?" 25 to 10. He made a fresh effort, and it was evident that, in the midst of his torpor, his whole being was intent upon returning to life. A clock struck 10. He started and said, "Let them carry me. Let them carry me to the palace." With the doctor's approval, Waldemar called his men and sent word to the Emperor. They laid Lupin on a stretcher and set out for the palace. "The first floor," he muttered. They carried him up. "At the end of the corridor," he said. "The last room on the left." They carried him to the last room, which was the 12th, and gave him a chair, on which he sat down exhausted. The Emperor arrived. Lupin did not stir, sat looking, unconscious, with no expression in his eyes. Then, in a few minutes, he seemed to wake, looked round him, at the walls, the ceilings, the people, and said, "A narcotic, I suppose?" "Yes," said the doctor. "Have they found the man? No. He seemed to be meditating and several times jerked his head with a thoughtful air. But they soon saw that he was asleep. The Emperor went up to Voldemar. "Order your car round." "Oh? But then, sire?" "Well, what?" "I am beginning to think that he is taking us in, and that all this is merely play-acting, to gain time." "Possibly, yes," said Voldemar, agreeing. "It's quite obvious. He is making the most of certain curious coincidences, but he knows nothing. And his story about gold coins and his narcotic are so many inventions. If we lend ourselves to his little game any longer, he'll slip out of your fingers. Your car, Waldemar." The Count gave his orders and returned. Lupin had not woke up. The Emperor, who was looking round the room, said to Voldemar, "This is the Minerva room, is it not?" "Yes, sire, but then why is there an N in two places?" There were, in fact, two N's, one over the chimney-piece, the other over an old, dilapidated clock fitted into the wall and displaying a complicated set of works, with weights hanging lifeless at the end of their cords. "The two N's," said Voldemar. The Emperor did not listen to the answer. Lupin had moved again, opening his eyes and uttering indistinct syllables. He stood up, walked across the room, and fell down from sheer weakness. Then came the struggle, the desperate struggle of his brain, his nerves, his will against that hideous, paralyzing torpor, the struggle of a dying man against death, the struggle of life against extinction. And the sight was one of infinite sadness. "He is suffering," muttered Voldemar. "Or, at least, he is pretending to suffer," declared the Emperor, "and pretending very cleverly at that. What an actor!" Lupin stammered. "An injection, doctor. An injection of caffeine. At once." ... "May I, sire?" asked the doctor. "Certainly, until 12 o'clock. Do all that he asks. He has my promise." "How many minutes before 12 o'clock?" asked Lupin. 40, said somebody. 40. I shall do it. I am sure to do it. I've got to do it. ... He took his head in his two hands. "Oh, if I had my brain, the real brain, the brain that thinks. It would be a matter of a second. There is only one dark spot left. But I cannot. My thoughts escape me. I can't grasp it. It's awful." His shoulders shook. Was he crying? They heard him repeating, 813, 813, ... and, in a lower voice, 813, an 8, a 1, a 3. Yes, of course. But why? That's not enough. ... The Emperor muttered, "He impresses me. I find it difficult to believe that a man can play a part like that." ... 11:30 struck. 11:45. Lupin remained motionless, with his fists glued to his temples. The Emperor waited, with his eyes fixed on a chronometer which Voldemar held in his hand. 10 minutes more. 5 minutes more. "Is the car there, Voldemar? Are your men ready?" "Yes, sire." "Is that watch of yours a repeater, Voldemar?" "Yes, sire." "At the last stroke of 12, then." ... But at the last stroke of 12, Waldemar. There was really something tragic about the scene, that sort of grandeur and solemnity which the hours assume at the approach of a possible miracle, when it seems as though the voice of fate itself were about to find utterance. The Emperor did not conceal his anguish. This fantastic adventurer who was called Arsène Lupin, and whose amazing life he knew, this man troubled him. And, although he was resolved to make an end of all this dubious story, he could not help waiting and hoping. 2 minutes more, 1 minute more. Then they counted by seconds. Lupin seemed asleep. "Come, get ready," said the Emperor to the Count. The Count went up to Lupin and placed his hand on his shoulder. The silvery chime of the repeater quivered and struck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Valdemar, old chap, pull the weights of the old clock. A moment of stupefaction. It was Lupin's voice, speaking very calmly. Valdemar, annoyed at the familiarity of the address, shrugged his shoulders. "Do as he says, Valdemar," said the Emperor. "Yes, do as I say, my dear Count," echoed Lupin, recovering his powers of chaff. "You know the ropes so well. All you have to do is to pull those of the clock, in turns. 1, 2, capital. That's how they used to wind it up in the old days." The pendulum, in fact, was started, and they heard its regular ticking. "Now the hands," said Lupin. "Set them at a little before 12. Don't move. Let me—" He rose and walked to the face of the clock, standing 2 feet away, at most, with his eyes fixed, with every nerve attentive. The 12 strokes sounded, 12 heavy, deep strokes. A long silence. Nothing happened. Nevertheless, the Emperor waited, as though he were sure that something was going to happen. And Valdemar did not move, stood with wide-open eyes. Lupin, who had stooped over the clock face, now drew himself up, muttering, "That's it. I have it." He went back to his chair and commanded, "Valdemar, set the hands at 2 minutes to 12 again. Oh, no, old chap, not backwards. The way the hands go. Yes, I know. It will take rather long, but it can't be helped." All the hours struck, and the half-hours up to 11:30. "Listen, Valdemar," said Lupin. And he spoke seriously, without jesting, as though himself excited and anxious. "Listen, Valdemar. Do you see on the face of the clock a little round dot marking the first hour? That dot is loose, isn't it? Put the forefinger of your left hand on it and press. Good. Do the same with your thumb on the dot marking the 3rd hour. Good. With your right hand, push in the dot at the 8th hour. Good. Thank you. Go and sit down, my dear fellow." The minute hand shifted, moved to the 12th dot, and the clock struck again. Lupin was silent and very white. The 12 strokes rang out in the silence. At the 12th stroke, there was a sound as of a spring being set free. The clock stopped dead. The pendulum ceased swinging, and suddenly the bronze ornament representing a ram's head which crowned the dial fell forwards, uncovering a sort of little recess cut out of the stone wall. In this recess was a chased silver casket. Lupin took it and carried it to the Emperor. "Would your Imperial Majesty be so good as to open it yourself? The letters which you instructed me to look for are inside." The Emperor raised the lid and seemed greatly astonished. The casket was empty. The casket was empty. It was an enormous, unforeseen sensation. After the success of the calculation made by Lupin, after the ingenious discovery of the secret of the clock, the Emperor, who had no doubt left as to the ultimate success, appeared utterly confounded. Opposite him was Lupin, pallid and wan, with drawn jaws and bloodshot eyes, gnashing his teeth with rage and impotent hate. He wiped the perspiration from his forehead, then snatched up the casket, turned it over, examined it, as though he hoped to find a false bottom. At last, for greater certainty, in a fit of fury, he crushed it, with an irresistible grip. That relieved him. He breathed more easily. The Emperor said, "Who has done this?" "Still the same man, sire, the one who is following the same road as I and pursuing the same aim. Mr. Kesselbach's murderer." "When?" "Last night." "Ah, sire, why did you not leave me free when I came out of prison? Had I been free, I should have come here without losing an hour. I should have arrived before him. I should have given Isilda money before he did. I should have read Maurich, the old French servant's diary, before he did." "So you think that it was through the revelations in the diary?" Quote. "Why, yes, sire, he had time to read them. And lurking I don't know where, kept informed of all our movements by I don't know whom, he put me to sleep last night, in order to get rid of me." But the palace was guarded. Guarded by your soldiers, sire. Does that count with a man like him? Besides, I have no doubt that Valdemar concentrated his search upon the outbuildings, thus thinning the posts in the palace. But the sound of the clock, those 12 strokes in the night. It was mere child's play, sire. Mere child's play to him to prevent the clock from striking. All this seems very impossible to my mind. It all seems monstrous clear to mine, sire. If it were possible to feel in every one of your soldiers' pockets here and now, or to know how much money they will each of them spend during the next 12 months, we should be sure to find 2 or 3 who are, at this moment, in possession of a few banknotes. French banknotes, of course. Oh, protested Waldemar. But yes, my dear Count, it is a question of price, and that makes no difference to him. If he wished, I am sure that you yourself. The Emperor, wrapped up in his own thoughts, was not listening. He walked across the room from left to right and right to left, then beckoned to one of the officers standing in the gallery. My car, and tell them to get ready. We're starting. He stopped, watched Lupin for a moment, and going up to the Count. You too, Waldemar, be off. Straight to Paris, without a break. Lupin pricked up his ears. He heard Waldemar reply. I should like to have a dozen additional guards, with that devil of a man. ... Take them, and look sharp. You must get there tonight. Lupin stamped his foot violently on the floor. Well, no, sire. No, no, no. It shan't be. I swear it shan't. No, no, never. What do you mean? And the letters, sire? The stolen letters? Upon my word. ... So, cried Lupin, indignantly folding his arms, so your Imperial Majesty gives up the struggle? You look upon the defeat as irretrievable? You declare yourself beaten? Well, I do not, sire. I have begun, and I mean to finish. The Emperor smiled at this display of mettle. I do not give up, but my police will set to work. Lupin burst out laughing. Excuse me, sire. It is so funny. Your police. Your Imperial Majesty's police. Why, they're worth just about as much as any other police. That is to say, nothing. Nothing at all. No, sire, I will not return to the Santé. Prison I can afford to laugh at, but time enough has been wasted as it is. I need my freedom against that man, and I mean to keep it. The Emperor shrugged his shoulders. You don't even know who the man is. I shall know, sire, and I alone can know. And he knows that I am the only one who can know. I am his only enemy. I am the only one whom he attacks. It was I whom he meant to hit the other day when he fired his revolver. He considered it enough to put me and me only to sleep last night, to be free to do as he pleased. The fight lies between him and me. The outside world has nothing to say to it. No one can help me, and no one can help him. There are 2 of us, and that is all. So far, chance has favored him, but in the long run it is inevitable. It is doomed that I should gain the day. Why? Because I am the better man. Suppose he kills you. He will not kill me. I shall draw his claws. I shall make him perfectly harmless. And you shall have the letters, sire. They are yours. There is no power on earth that can prevent me from restoring them to you. He spoke with a violent conviction and a tone of certainty that gave to the things which he foretold the real appearance of things already accomplished. The Emperor could not help undergoing a vague, inexplicable feeling in which there was a sort of admiration, combined with a good deal of that confidence which Lupin was demanding in so masterful a manner. In reality, he was hesitating only because of his scruples against employing this man and making him, so to speak, his ally. And, anxiously, not knowing what decision to take, he walked from the gallery to the windows without saying a word. At last he asked, "And who says that the letters were stolen last night?" "The theft is dated, sire." "What do you say?" Look at the inner side of the pediment which concealed the hiding place. The date is written in white chalk. Midnight, the 24th of August. So it is, muttered the emperor, nonplussed. How was it that I did not see? And he added, betraying his curiosity, just as with those two N's painted on the wall, I can't understand. This is the Minerva room. This is the room in which Napoleon, the Emperor of the French, slept, said Lupin. How do you know? Ask Waldemar, sire. As for myself, when I was turning over the old servant's diary, it came upon me as a flash of light. I understood that Shears and I had been on the wrong scent. Apoon, the imperfect word written by the Grand Duke Hermann on his deathbed, is a contraction not of Apollon but of Napoleon. That's true. You are right, said the emperor. The same letters occur in both words and in the same order. The Grand Duke evidently meant to write Napoleon. But that figure 813? ... Ah, that was the point that gave me most trouble. I always had an idea that we must add up the three figures 8, 1, and 3, and the number 12 thus obtained seemed to me at once to apply to this room, which is the 12th leading out of the gallery, but that was not enough for me. There must be something else, something which my enfeebled brain could not succeed in translating into words. The sight of that clock, situated precisely in the Napoleon room, was a revelation to me. The number 12 evidently meant 12 o'clock. The hour of noon, the hour of midnight. Is this not the solemn moment which a man most readily selects? But why those three figures 8, 1, and 3, rather than any others which would have given the same total? It was then that I thought of making the clock strike for the first time, by way of experiment, and it was while making it strike that I saw the dots of the first, third, and 8th hour were movable, and that they alone were movable. I therefore obtained three figures, 1, 3, and 8, which, placed in a more prophetic order, gave the number 813. Waldemar pushed the three dots. The spring was released, and your Imperial Majesty knows the result. This, sire, is the explanation of that mysterious word and of those three figures 8, 1, 3, which the Grand Duke wrote with his dying hand, and by the aid of which he hoped that his son would one day recover the secret of Veldenz and become the possessor of the famous letters which he had hidden there. The emperor listened with eager attention, more and more surprised at the ingenuity, perspicacity, shrewdness, and intelligent will which he observed in the man. Waldemar, he said when Lupin had finished. Sire? But, just as he was about to speak, shouts were heard in the gallery outside. Waldemar left the room and returned. It's the mad girl, sire. They won't let her pass. Let her come in, cried Lupin eagerly. She must come in, sire. At a sign from the emperor, Waldemar went out to fetch Isilda. Her entrance caused a general stupefaction. Her pale face was covered with dark blotches. Her distorted features bore signs of the keenest suffering. She panted for breath, with her two hands clutched against her breast. "Oh!" cried Lupin, struck with horror. "What is it?" asked the emperor. "Your doctor, sire. There is not a moment to lose." He went up to her. "Speak, Isilda. Have you seen anything? Have you anything to say?" The girl had stopped. Her eyes were less vacant, as though lighted up by the pain. She uttered sounds, but not a word. "Listen," said Lupin. "Answer yes or no. Make a movement of the head. Have you seen him? Do you know where he is? You know who he is. Listen, if you don't answer... ... He suppressed a gesture of anger, but, suddenly, remembering the experiment of the day before, and that she seemed rather to have retained a certain optical memory of the time when she enjoyed her full reason, he wrote on the white wall a capital L and M. She stretched out her arm toward the letters and nodded her head as though in assent. "And then," said Lupin, "what then? Write something yourself." But she gave a fearful scream and flung herself to the ground, yelling. Then, Suddenly came silence, immobility, one last convulsive spasm, and she moved no more. "Dead?" asked the emperor. "Poisoned, sire." "Oh, the poor thing! And by whom?" "By him, sire. She knew him, no doubt. He must have been afraid of what she might tell." The doctor arrived. The emperor pointed to the girl. Then, addressing Waldemar, "All your men to turn out. Make them go through the houses. Telegraph to the stations on the frontier." He went up to Lupin. "How long do you want to recover the letters?" "A month, sire. 2 months at most." "Very well. Waldemar will wait for you here. He shall have my orders and full powers to grant you anything you wish." "What I should like, sire, is my freedom." "You are free." Lupin watched him walk away and said between his teeth, "My freedom first. And afterward, when I have given you back the letters, O Majesty, one little shake of the hand. Then we shall be quits. ...